I'm welcome to PJ Maybe's Red Dwarf review with Sadako 24. So, we've got a few people in the chat. We've got Darren,
Hello.
Captain Spock, although Deckard is a replicant, although Deckard isn't a replicant, although Deckard is a replicant, although Deckard, but he keeps saying that, so we'll leave that one. And Windology, who I believe has changed her Twitter handle. Gen X Wen.
Yeah.
It confused me. I'm going, who's that? Then I realised who it was. Then I had to actually go back and oops. But hi guys, and thank you for joining us for Book 2, Better Than Life. Or basically, as we say, it's not 2021. Definitely not 2021. So, what was your thoughts to the book initially?
Oh yeah, wow, that's a long time ago now, because I read it when I was 13.
I was a wee bit older when I read it first time, but yeah, a while ago the first time I read it.
Because I remember reading segments of it and thinking, "Wow, that's from White Hole and that's from Maroon, but they're kind of connected."
Yes, they've connected 4 of the episodes in this.
Right. Just to clarify, this was written before Series 4, so
I think it was after Season 2, so it was between Season 3 and 4. So a lot of these things were written first and then incorporated into the episodes.
Yeah, I think they'd already written Series 3, so they lifted from Backwards, Marooned, and Polymorph. They hadn't. I don't know what was going on with the production of Series 4. I know that was a delayed season, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was like Series 3 was 1989, Series 4 was like 1991. There was a kind of a year gap.
Yeah, and this book came out in 1991, so I think this book was roughly written about the same time as they were probably writing Season 4 anyway.
It says it was 1990. That's the publisher. Right, it was published by Viking in 1990. It was published by Penguin in 1991. So it was Viking got it
first. What
I
had was the Penguin book. That's why.
Yeah.
Because I remember actually, I think I have got the book somewhere because I was digging it out and looking through them, but I was doing a lot of tidying because I've got so much I have to catalogue this weekend. So I'm going to be busy this weekend recataloguing my man cave. So that's going to take me the whole weekend. That's going to be fun.
I'm probably going to have to box up my man cave soon because I've got plans to move.
Nice bigger room for your man cave. The house doesn't matter. If that could be bigger or smaller, it makes no difference as long as the man cave's bigger.
I hope it's bigger. I don't know. When I say plans, I mean I've got like ambitions to move. I don't know if I'm.
Yeah, I know that thing. Maybe because when we first moved into this one, we initially were happy with where we were, and we weren't looking. But as soon as we looked and saw this house, we went, "Yep." And then suddenly it was a case of bigger ambitions. Well, we could do this with it, and we could do that with it, and it could do this, and we need to actually get it first. Already ideas what you're going to do with it, and they actually actually said, "Yep, you can get it," and "Yep, you can get the mortgage." So yeah, that's a good thing with the ambitions for it. The ambitions are always better than what you start with, and it gives you a target to end up with. Yeah. So, what was your first thoughts when you read the book those years ago?
It was good. I thought it was a good. In a way, it's basically it rounds off the story, doesn't it?
It did. See, my first thoughts were initially I thought, wow, it basically expanded on a lot. It tied them all together, whereas the TV show obviously didn't. I read it after. I think it was. I didn't get it in 91, but I think I'd seen it after Season 4 had been out. So I got it and I thought it certainly tied it all in. and it expanded the story a lot more, and I was quite enamoured with it. I thought it was one of the better of the 2 books that I had read at the time. I thought it was the best one.
Yeah.
Which, considering I was a big reader at the time, so I wasn't surprised that I'd flown through it and enjoyed it, and I'd read it a couple of times. But
see, I wasn't a big reader at the time, so this was probably the biggest novel I'd read at that moment.
I was reading Robert Jordan, Wheel of Time, and I had read. I was reading. Oh, who did the Belgariad? I can't remember who it was, but the books were like that, and I had read Tolkien as well at the time, so I was reading quite a lot. I was reading probably about 7-8 hours a day. Basically, I would come home from work and just sit and read till I went to bed, and I would do that regularly. Now I do that with my TV shows and bits and pieces, my magic cards, but then it was just books. I was right into my comics and books then, so I used to do that. So I was reading a lot. Not as much now. I don't read as much now because I'm getting old and my eyesight's getting worse. But audiobooks are ideal for me. So
I was a bit of a Philistine 13-year-old now I think of it.
It was 13. I was reading comics. So I was reading a lot of comics. So I was 2000 AD and stuff like that. Star-Lord, Spider-Man. I was reading what I could get comic-wise. It was mainly 2000 AD and Commando and Starblazer. It was UK comics. But I did get the occasional US ones with Spider-Man and stuff like that. So I was reading a lot of comics when I was a teenager. And then basically I went on to books, and I had read Sharp's novels, Bernard Cornwell. I'd read a lot of those stuff. I'd read a load as I said, what do you call them? Tolkien. I'd read that one, although none of the names meant anything to me because I would see the name, but I wouldn't pronounce it in my head because it was too difficult. It's only after I'd read it, I'd heard it in audio or I'd seen the movies that the names made sense. Like Gandalf, I didn't know it was pronounced Gandalf. I just read it as, I just saw the name and I didn't even think what the name was. I just knew that was the name of the wizard. But that was because I was young and I basically, if it was a difficult word, I would just, I recognise it and move on.
Do you know something that I didn't know until modern times, but that's it. But it's actually in the book. There's a bit where it references it talks about the Gelfs.
Yes.
And there's a particular discussion of a situation where someone had a genetically engineered sofa.
Yes.
And it cheated on his wife.
He cheated on his wife with it, and he basically was known as the man who was cuckolded by his.
Yeah, exactly. I read that. I thought, oh, yes, that's what cuckolded means.
Yes, see, now I know what it meant, but I must admit at the time it meant nothing to me. Cuckolded didn't mean anything, but at the time I just read it as well. I knew what it meant, but I didn't know what it meant. I just assumed what it meant. Somebody whose wife had an affair with her furniture, that's what I thought cuckolded meant. But obviously now we know what it means. It's a bit more... We're a bit more educated on definitions.
Well, it's been popularized, hasn't it, by the...
Yes, it has been nowadays. But what about when you reread it for the review?
I really enjoyed rereading it. I got really involved in it. I read kind of a bit every day because it was just like because it is very episodic. It's like every part is kind of tells a story. It's like it's like a serial, isn't it?
Yes,
in one go.
Yeah. See, the thing is, I think because I'd rewatched all the TV shows again. Well, I've watched them numerous times, but obviously, especially for the reviews, I rewatched them all again. Better Than Life didn't hold up as well. It didn't. I know they basically do a lot more explanations, which, considering some of my favourite books, one of my favourite books over the last few years has been Ready Player One. And in effect, that's lists and explanations and details. It just expands on stuff. So it's not the fact that I feel as if they're expanding with details that mean nothing. It's just, I don't know, maybe because I'm so enamored with the TV series, but these are all in, I can picture it that way. Whereas obviously this being a slightly darker humour, and there's certain things in it that would never be on the TV show. I wasn't as enamoured when I reread it, which is weird because I still enjoy it, but I think when I was younger, reading it, I'd only seen the TV show maybe the once, and when I was reading it, it was just it was an expansion on it, and it was going into more details, and it was giving them a more linear storytelling rather than just episodic. Yeah. And I thought I liked that, but obviously now, when after watching the show again numerous times and then reading the book again, then I think I actually preferred the episodic aspects of it, maybe because the humour is more visual. Okay. And I think that's what it is. Maybe as I'm getting older, visual humour is more attractive to me, and that's where it slightly falls down. But then again, you can't actually really complain because both of them are aspects of their time. But I think visually, when I was younger, things weren't as... Although I grew up watching things like Norman Wisdom, Harold Lloyd, Buster Keaton, Laurel and Hardy, stuff like that. That was visual as well. I did enjoy visual humour. Abbott and Costello, the pratfalls, things like that. But as I was reading, I think I enjoyed the more intelligent cohesion of a book. Mm-hmm. Whereas now, I think visually it's become more... what's the word? More attractive to me. Visual humour is more attractive to me than intelligent books. Maybe because I'm actually struggling to read nowadays. So somebody reading it to me is probably not as encompassing as reading it yourself. Because you know what it's like when you read it yourself. You miss a wee bit, you can go back and read the page and, I remember that. Because if they're talking about something, you go back. Whereas in an audiobook, you would have to go and try and find where you are in the book to do that. You can't flick back through the pages and stuff like that just to remind you what they're talking about. I think that's what it is I'm going on more to Audible. I'm not getting the same experience with a book than I used to. And I think times are changing. As I'm getting older and my reading is declining, I think I'm getting more enjoyment out of visual humour.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Which I still say, it's not saying it's a bad book. It's a really good book. But I think it's just considering how I felt when I initially read it compared to now rereading it. See, there's a thing again. It's not reading it. I'm listening to it in Audible. Yes, it's Chris Barry reading it and he's putting the voices on. You can picture the characters doing it all, but it's still, you don't still get that same experience of reading it yourself.
So do you feel like maybe, are you saying that you still kind of prefer Red Dwarf on a TV medium than a novel medium? At
the moment, yes. I prefer the visual medium rather than the audible medium, but I do prefer, as Let Fit to Be Read says, the physical books are actually a lot better than the audible as well. I do prefer reading it myself. It's just I'll need to actually dig out my glasses more and sit and read, which it's probably I should have done with the books rather than the audible. But at the moment as well, I don't have the same amount of time. I can sit and read a book all the way through in the one go. So because I've got a busier lifestyle, I'm working, I've got stuff for the family, I've just bits and pieces to do, stuff for YouTube. I don't have the time to just sit for 6 hours a day reading a book. I would love to, but unfortunately I don't. So Audible just takes over from that because I can listen to it in the car and I'm doing a lot of driving. So if I'm driving 3 hours a day, I'm getting 3 hours a day of a book. But if I was sitting reading it, maybe get an hour here and there, and it would take a lot longer to read it, or read it just before I go to my bed and get an hour here and there. And that's where it falls down for me. I would love to read the physical media because I do prefer that, but I don't have the time to do that. Hence the reason why it's usually comic books or small short stories. If I'm reading, I prefer that. It's just because I've got the time to sit down and read it all the way through. So it's old age kicked in and actually kicked me in the teeth, as they say.
Another feeling.
But I am aware of my limitation, and it's all to do with a busier lifestyle and not getting the same experience from visual, audible, or physical. If I've got a choice between the three, visual at the moment, because it's easier to have something on and doing something else and still watching it while I'm doing server installs or PC installs or troubleshooting. I can still have that on, and it's visual and audio, and I could just watch it in the background. Whereas if I'm doing stuff, an audible book, I need to concentrate more, which means I can't really do that while I'm actually working in the background, doing things that need the concentration. But if I want to enjoy something, I prefer to sit down and read it. So it's all to do with time-wise. Times are changing, as they say.
So we should probably start from the beginning. Well, a bit of backstory, because to pick up where we left off last time. Because
yes, I'll leave that one because you have got a better understanding of the books than me. I do appreciate someone with a higher knowledge than I do, especially at my old age.
Right. Okay, in the first novel, which we covered last time, Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, there was a segment where, like, the end of there was 3 parts. There was the part where Lister's on Red Dwarf. He joins Red Dwarf. The accident happens. He has to get back to Earth. And then the final part was a segment which was, we were led to believe at first that they got back to Earth.
Yep, that's how the last book finished.
Yeah, because the thing is, like, they could have ended the first book with the trip home, and they're on the Nova 5, and they finally see Earth. Now, they could have ended it there, but I think they continued it for 2 reasons. One is there was still an interesting story to tell once they reached Earth about, how they would, because, it's their ambition. It's not just, oh, there's Earth, we're home, the end. It's how they adjust to Earth.
Yes, yeah, I think if they had actually did the adjusting part and left it there without you finding out that they were in better than life. Like, for instance, the adjusting and how he went to find this wee village, or the wee town, and Rimmer got right into the adulation, and then the cat just going on to his own thing, I think would have been a way to finish it, and not telling you that you're in better than life, and then picking it up on this book, and then doing all the stories around that about how they realise they're in better than life. I think it would have been a slightly better way of doing it. Yeah, the transition of them making it to Earth and the adulation, and then finding out later. I think, yes, it was a good way to do it, but I think they went a wee bit too far, and I think they should have finished it without the reader knowing that they're in better than life.
Well, the problem with that is, I think they had to end the first book with it, because I think if they'd done the first book and had to think that you're on Earth, and then the second book is, oh no, they weren't on Earth, they were in the game, I think that would have felt like a cop-out. I think they wanted to end it with it acknowledge that they're still that they're basically playing this computer game.
Yeah,
so they're basically.
They did mention the computer game early on in the book. Obviously, they were talking about it being smuggled, and they were talking about the addictive versions of it. But even things like not actually explaining it, just how he settled into Lister settled into his small town, not going over it. The fact that it's constantly Bedford Falls. It could be just called Bedford Falls, and it's Christmas Eve, and he's just worried about the pain in his arm, and then he just left it with the U equals BTL, and it could have finished there without going into. So before it finishes, if you understand or if you remember the reference back to the game Better Than Life, it could have been a mystery to end it on. And if obviously the ones that have read the watched the TV show and remember the part from Better Than Life, understands what the BTL means, then they know what the next book's going to be about. Whereas people who maybe hadn't seen the TV show, it's I wonder where this is going. Why is he getting the pain spelling out the words? So it would have been a way to finish it, telling people that already have an understanding of it, they're in Better Than Life, but leaving it wide open that they're going to explain that in the next book rather than explaining it there and then re-explaining bits of it later on. I think that's what I was meaning, that whereas they come back to Earth, they see how the adulation that Rimmer takes and the quietness that Lister takes, and Cat disappearing on his own and you don't really know about it. So they could have still concentrated on those two parts, or at least maybe Lister's part, him just talking about Rimmer going on his own and taking the adulation, and him how at Christmas Eve he's finding out there's something not quite right, but he'll deal with it in the morning because it's Christmas Eve. You didn't need to go into the Bedford Falls constantly every Christmas Eve because it's reinforcing it. Whereas in the second book, if they'd started off from that part where he wakes up in the morning and it's still Christmas Eve again, and then go from there. That's the way I was looking at it, reading the two books back to back. I think I would have preferred if they'd actually got back to Earth and it's just following Lister and why he's going to this quiet small town and how it's nice and it's recognizable without actually explaining too much about it, because they could talk about Bedford Falls, and if people didn't know anything about the movie It's a Wonderful Life, it would have just skipped over. They wouldn't have understood that aspect of it. Whereas obviously It's a Wonderful Life is one of my favourite movies, so I understood where it was. That's where I thought they could have just followed him explaining why he's moved out of the limelight, where Rimmer's encouraged it, and God knows where the cat got to, and then the pain, and it's U equals Better Than Life, and he says, it's Christmas tomorrow, we'll put it off until then. And then it could have picked up from waking up the next morning.
Well, see, the thing is, I hadn't seen Bedford. I hadn't seen It's a Wonderful Life yet when I read the book, but I still kind of got the idea of where Bedford Falls was meant to be, what kind of community it was meant to be.
Yeah,
I think it was kind of. I think it works if you've not seen the film. Still, it
does, but it's a bit more of a mystery because it could be Springfield, as in any town USA of that certain era. So that's what I was meaning, because I grew up with it, because my mum loved It's a Wonderful Life and White Christmas. They were my two Christmas movies growing up, because it was my mum's favourite too, so I sat and watched them every Christmas with my mum. So I understood the references, but even if you didn't, it was putting in the Anytown USA, small, quiet, out of the way, still got a community value. That's what I was meaning that. But I just felt they went a wee bit too far with the finishing it. I would have preferred if they'd actually just cut it where he found out to himself, but he doesn't explain it and go off and try and get them all out of it. I think just the finishing it where people are getting told, actually, this is not what you think. If you know we're in Better Than Life, then you know it's definitely not what you think. But if you don't know the fact that he's got words written in there, he understands it, then it could explain from there and then go forward from there. Well, that's the way I was looking at it, but I can be a wee bit critical with things like that.
Well, I think they wanted to end it with the character making Lister being faced with a choice. It's like knowing knowing he's in better than life is one thing, but like deciding what he's going to do next, I think that's the crux point. That's the do I stay, do I go? And it's like at the last minute he's thinking, well, I've got reasons to stay. I've got reasons not to go because I'm unhappy with my life over in the other side. I'm not sure I want to return to that life. I think that was kind of the.
Yes, but you think about it, the last book finished, it was a case of, well, I'll deal with it tomorrow because I can't leave them at Christmas. He was sort of justifying it to himself. Yeah. Whereas I think I would have, just personally, I am aware that personally I was thinking that I wish they had actually not gone down that route, because that could have been something they dealt with at a later date, saying, I wish he'd been, I'm thinking that he didn't need to actually be, I'm dying, because that could have been, see this book, Better Than Life, I was expecting it when I first read it. Even when I reread it, I was expecting it to be more about the Better Than Life story rather than Better Than Life just being the first part of it and then it expands out. Because you're obviously expecting, it's called Better Than Life, so you were expecting at least half to 3/4 maybe to be in Better Than Life and about the struggle to get out of it. Whereas you look at it, they did a bit of the last book and just the first part of this book in Better Than Life. I don't even think it's a quarter of the book.
No, it's basically they divided the book into 3 parts. The first part is the game. The second part is the second and third. No, they divide it into 4 parts, don't they?
Yeah. Yes, because the first part's the game. Second part is the White Hole Marooned.
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. The next part is Polymorph and backwards.
No, the fourth part's backwards.
The fourth part's backwards. The third part's Polymorph, yes. But yeah, it's that aspect of it. Whereas you think about it, so about a quarter of the book is about Better Than Life. Whereas I was hoping it would have been a lot more, just because Better Than Life is such a wide array of things that could have happened in it. Considering the bits and pieces you did here, well, they could have expanded a lot more.
Yeah, but I think the writers were thinking, well, look, at the end of the day, this setting is insubstantial. It's not real. So we got to focus on the real part of it, which is how are they going to get out, what they're going to find when they get out. Like, because in Better Than Life, the only time things have any consequences is when Rimmer starts causing things to go wrong.
Yes, like in the TV show, it's Rimmer's.
Yeah.
Whereas in the episode in the TV, I didn't actually think it was Rimmer's fault. I thought it was the cat's fault.
Cat probably set it in motion.
Set it in motion. So, because remember in the episode, it was his father come up and says, "You're a smeghead. We're ashamed of you." And he goes, "That's not my thing." And Cat says, "No, that's mine." And it was from there that Rimmer's mind started rebelling. Whereas to me, it was Cat was the trigger for it. Whereas in the book, it wasn't Cat, it was him who was the trigger. And it expanded more from there. So it basically gave his mind a bigger story in the story, as it were. Whereas in the episode, it was basically, to me, it was the trigger. His mind was rebelling, but it wasn't his fault. It was the Cat that triggered it.
Well, I think in the book version, it goes a bit more into the, like it's a different. It's not just kind of like it actually specifically says in the book. Like there's a part where it says you can't just think up a vehicle and it appears for you.
Yes,
it's like,
yes, because your mind wouldn't accept it. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. The book version of the game is different to the TV version of the game.
Yes, because they did a picture something in the bike suddenly appeared, or the E-type suddenly appeared. Yes, but it is. They are different enough that they are, as the captain would say, different dimensions of the same story type.
Yeah.
So basically, you've got the same story, but told with 2 completely different methods and consequences on it.
Well, I mean, it was basically that. So what I mean is basically that it was more of an emphasis on the fact that Rimmer's subconscious was at play.
Yes.
And it's Rimmer's
That's what I mean.
subconscious.
In this, his subconscious got a bigger story arc than in the TV show, whereas the TV show, his subconscious was triggered by the cat to rebel. Whereas this one, his mind was just rebelling for the fact it was his mind.
It was rebelling for a while because it set him up with Juanita in the first book anyway.
Yes.
And she was just a nightmare.
Yeah.
And then
sleeping around and everything. So
yeah. And so he's kind of trying to figure out, well, what's she doing? If this is my PJ, can you put some headphones in? I think I can hear myself echoing.
All right, I will do.
Yeah. Okay. So basically Rimmer's has been told by Lister that they're in the game. But he keeps on thinking, well, the one thing that does yes, I'm mega successful. Yes, I've had all these these advancements. I've got a kind of a hard light body now. Where does my wife fit into this? Because my wife is not what I want. She's this, and it kind of becomes clear in the end. Wait a minute, she's not what I desire, but she is from my life. I remember her. She's my Uncle Frank's.
Was it his Uncle Frank or is it his brother Frank?
Oh, sorry, his brother Frank. Brother Frank, yeah. Yeah.
So everybody in his version was everybody he knew.
Yeah.
Which I suppose it's everybody. It's the same idea. Whereas you got Bedford Falls, it's everything that Lister remembered from the movie, and his idea of his kids and Kachansky.
But Kachansky's from reality, but yeah.
Yes, but it's that type of thing. But it's I think sometimes it's the darker humour guides the story differently, because obviously there are certain aspects of the humour you couldn't see in the TV at all because it's a family show, whereas in the book the humour is darker. And I think that's what sort of guided it on different trajectories.
Yeah,
that word that I'm trying to say my teeth don't like. Trajectory, that's the word.
Well, because it immediately starts going wrong for both of them because it's split. It's non-linear because basically by the end of Rimmer's segment we've caught up with the beginning of Lister's segment, because in Lister's segment we have basically this juggernaut crash through the town.
Yeah, and the female, the prostitute, LaBouche, Trixie LaBouche, turning up, which we don't know who Trixie LaBouche is. So then it starts on the other story.
Yeah, but the thing is, that very act basically, because Trixie recognizes Lister and says, "Yes, I know you," and basically Trixie leaves it, and it's quite sad because there is something about Claire Grogan's face. I can imagine her having that scowl on her face when she just feels betrayed and she just leaves him.
Yes.
And
did you see Claire Grogan in Gregory's Girl?
Yes, but like years later.
Yes, I grew up. Well, I saw Gregory's Girl before I saw Red Dwarf. So yes, some people used to say she was quite a wooden actress.
Oh.
And I didn't think so, considering the other female in Gregory's Girl was Dee Hepburn.
I think so, yeah.
I thought she was wooden, whereas Claire Grogan I thought was a very good actress, considering she was also in
what was
the band.
Was Dee wooden, or do you think was she meant to be playing the part that apathetically? Because she was interested. She was not really interested in Gregory, whereas Claire Grogan was.
Aye, but I think she was quite wooden because I know aspects of it because it was filmed up in Cumbernauld, just not far from where I stayed at the time, and I knew a couple of people who had gone to the school, and things like, remember the William Shatner stories about how in T.J. Hooker he would come running round and everybody had to run dead slow so he didn't look as if he was out of shape. Well, accordingly, they had to do that with Dee Hepburn.
Oh,
and that's why I thought she was dead wooden, because it didn't look realistic. She's meant to be this sports star, and it looked like everybody around her had to act in a particular way, which just made her look stilted, because she was trying to act this particular sort of nonchalant, and it just looked dead wooden because she didn't look the part, and I think that's why I think she was quite wooden.
Well, the thing about
whereas Claire Grogan,
well, the thing
I
is,
loved her part in it. So the Mr. Spaceman, and the self-deprecation she would do in it, the wee slagging bit she would have at Gregory. I thought she was a very good actress. Plus, she used to be my favourite Altered Images. No, Altered Images.
Altered Images, yeah. Altered Images, old band.
I should be happy. Do you know what I mean? I was thinking Altered Images. I'm actually thinking the one with the long hair. Altered Images was the band with the long hair. It was Happy Birthday.
Yeah, that was a song. Yeah,
was the song Happy Birthday, and I Should Be Happy.
Yeah,
was it Altered Images? It probably
that was Altered Images. Yeah,
yeah. What am I thinking of? The one that's actually, I'm thinking that Altered Images, a different one. It was probably the ones with the long hair, half-shaved head at one side, long hair at the other. The New Romantic type.
Human League. You're thinking
Human League. That's what I'm thinking of. Human League. But so it's just the name. For some reason, actually, it's twisted in my head. But I loved her in that. She was always jumping around. She was smiling. She was a really good singer. And then I saw her in Red Dwarf, and I thought, yes. And I thought she was really good. So yeah, I could have actually pictured her quite easily with that downcast face, the scouring eyes, and the sort of daggers. Yes, I can imagine that based on Claire Grogan's what I liked.
Yeah. So basically, Rimmer's part was that he was basically ended up bankrupt really quickly, didn't he?
Well, see, I always find that weird because it's like any of the TV. It's a trope on TV shows, and I found that a trope even when I first read it. A trope that suddenly he gets a phone call and he's got nothing.
Yeah,
it's like was it the Batman one with Bane? He's basically somebody breaks into the stock exchange, and suddenly all his money disappears to the point where everything, his house he's been in his family for generations, is being repossessed, and you're sitting there thinking, really?
Mm-hmm.
It's basically they're meant to. Nobody actually works out that somebody broke into the stock exchange and suddenly all his family money has disappeared to the point where he's not got a penny.
Well,
and he can't do anything. And that's to me, it's like that type of thing.
Yeah, but there are instances where that's happened, where like you've got like say MC Hammer or Vanilla Ice, where they become really, really popular, really rich, and then suddenly before you know it, that like they didn't know once they realize that they can't sustain their career, suddenly they're in major financial trouble, and they've got to say goodbye to what they've earned.
Yes, but that's usually a case of they've realised they've exceeded their spending capacity. Their lawyers have come up and says, listen, you need to do something about this. That's when they go, oh, well, no. So, they might declare bankrupt, but they're suddenly not turfed out of every single property they own. Their clothes are being repossessed, their furniture's being it's that aspect of it. It's just almost like everything's getting taken away from you, which I don't know. I just always found that a bit of a trope that suddenly you look, these multi-billionaires suddenly don't have a penny to their name, and they literally can't even. They get kicked out of their house. They can't drive. Their clothes are being repossessed, and it just seemed like a bit of a trope in that respect. But yes, but in the game, I could understand it because it's the game having to do it to him to trigger that. So the game was easier to reconcile it with rather than a real life situation.
Yeah. So basically, what happens is he gets repossessed, and so he has to. Because obviously there's he owes the bank money. He basically gets. Yeah, and his body gets repossessed as well because he basically borrows the body. It's an artificial body.
He leases it. He leases it.
Yeah. And basically, the company leases it from Wanted back. So basically, he's reduced to being just a sound wave.
Yes.
And he shares. Yeah.
He shares a cell with 3 others, which I didn't see the sense in either. Because Trixie LaBouche, she was in because somebody used her body to commit crimes.
Yeah.
Well, she stayed at somebody else's, bounced between 2 walls in somebody else's apartment. So they know this happens. They can actually take people out of their body and lock them in a sound jail so their body's not taken, and they don't think that people could actually commit a crime in somebody else's body. Those aspects to me were weird.
Well, I mean, to a degree, that was because, but they were all awaiting trial, though, weren't they? So they could make the case for the. I mean, I think Rimmer hadn't been put on trial yet, had he? He hadn't been sentenced.
No, but they told him it could take 18 months for it to happen, and even the ones with a criminal conviction, it just seemed a wee bit weird. It was almost, I could understand it within the game, but like, for instance, the criminal, the Jimmy, was it Jimmy? That
just
one.
A minute. I'm just checking because I remember. Let's see.
There was 2 of them. There was Jimmy and
Tonto. I
Tonto.
know that. Well, the
Tonto
thing is,
was the one that was outside, so it was Jimmy. It was in the prison. Yeah, he was getting charged with murder. So why was he in a? Was he in a hired body or whatever that they repossessed it and sold it? But he was in for murder, and yet the body was taken away from him. It just didn't seem to make sense. It would have been better if they were ones that were in financial difficulty rather than criminal.
Wow,
for crimes.
But that was Rimmer's hell, though, wasn't it? Rimmer's hell was being around the dregs of society and being beneath them. In the pecking order.
So it sort of worked with that, but I just found it a wee teeny bit weird with the aspects of it. But the thing is, with weird, you could get away with within the book. So there was bits I would think that doesn't make sense, and then I think, well, it's actually in a game, so it doesn't need to make sense.
Yeah.
It's like playing a game and you're basically crouching down behind something, nobody can see you. Yeah, you know they can, but it's just the game that you're crouched down that you obviously don't want the characters to see you as long as you crouch. It doesn't matter if your butt is hanging out the back, that type of thing. So I can understand game logic, and I suppose it worked. But when they were writing it, I was thinking, that's a bit of a trope, that, and they seem the 2 guys seem to just be constantly going down tropes.
So you would say it was more the trope aspect than the necessary whether it was plausible or not. It was more it felt like something you'd seen before, and you felt like, so you wouldn't, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I think it's the fact is because it's in Better Than Life, I could accept the plausibility of it because it's in a game, and game logic's never the same. So it's still a game no matter how realistic it seems. However, I just felt as if they were following tropes that, considering the TV shows and stuff like that, they would take a trope and subvert it. Whereas to me, I don't think they were subverting enough of the tropes. Because you look at it, like, for instance, The Last Man Alive, any other program, it would be the space hero and this, whereas they took The Last Man Alive, a bum who just didn't want to do anything.
Yeah.
So they would take a trope, but they would subvert it so it was actually a parody of it. Whereas this one, they just seem to take the trope and didn't really subvert it. They just seem to run with it.
Yeah. Well, see, there are some bits of description I like of the escape. Was like, what is it? When Tonto first kills the guy, he says, "Sorry, man, you're the establishment. I hate killing people. It's such a downer." Then it cuts to
3 downers later.
3 downers later.
Yeah, I see things like that. Whereas, yes, he's sort of that's what I was meaning. They're taking the trope, so he's this villain, and In fact, he goes to fire his gun. He's painted it with flowers, and he forgets to load it. And then eventually, sorry man, I had to kill your establishment. It's such a downer. And then he goes 3 downers later. See, to me, there's taking the trope of this psycho, who just keeps saying the right things, but he still does it anyway. But they did it such a twist that it was a funny twist. Whereas a few of the tropes in this, I felt as if they didn't actually twist it. They just sort of let it run or just roll down the hill. There wasn't a lot of twists in it.
Okay. I mean, the other one was, of course, when he says there was this gunfight, and it says like basically he flicked his gun Cagney style, and then killing 2 of the guards and earning the 3rd a permanent desk job.
Yeah. See, that's what I'm saying. But you can see the Red Dwarf humor coming in certain aspects, but it's like the one where Lister's in the car with not in the book, in the TV show. Right. I'm trying to remember. He was in.
Lister was.
It was Horseman of the Apocalypse. Remember, Horseman of the Apocalypse. He was in the car.
Oh yeah,
with the tramp, and basically, it was playing the tramp, but he was only in to have sex in the game. So they were playing that out, but she was still playing the trope, even though it was a bit twisted. I think in this, they were trying to do that, but sometimes they would actually take the wee twist to make it funny, but other times they would just sort of bounce it back and just continue with the trope. That's the parts that I was meaning. Other times you would expect them to take that trope and just twist it and twist it and twist it and twist it. Whereas here, they just seem to take the trope and just let it run a wee twist, and then back into the trope. It's almost like they didn't know where to go with it.
Well, the interesting thing is, during this escape, so Rimmer ends up basically, there was a mix-up, and he ends up in Trixie LaBouche's body, and Jimmy ends up in Rimmer's body.
Yes.
And uses Rimmer's body to basically be a cop killer.
Yeah.
And so it's like, so Rimmer's kind of watching his body, kind of shooting a bunch of cops. Like, God, how's this going to look in court? Like, for me.
See, that was quite good, but then I was thinking again well, the cops know because they're actually shouting. You hear that so the Rimmer's shouting, and it's obvious it's not Rimmer doing it. And then they've got Rimmer in Trixie's body. So once they interviewed her, they would realise it wasn't him. So it's that aspect of it. It sort of takes. It's like, I'm trying to think of a movie I've seen. Actually, it's a book. There's a book called Lockton. John Scalzi. It's basically about people paralytic, but there's now remote bodies they can implant, and they can go into electronic bodies they can control, and other people have got them. So what they're doing is hijacking them, committing a crime with it, and that other person's getting the blame. But they know people know it can be hijacked. So how would they automatically assume somebody's doing the crime if they know that can be done? That's what I mean.
Well, but the point is, in this, it's Rimmer's worst fear of being framed, and it's not about, he can prove it, and it's like he can't. It's like that's the ultimate nightmare for him, is being framed for doing, and basically having his body kind of taken away from him.
Yes.
But the interesting
within the game, it works better. That's what I'm saying. In the game, it definitely works a lot better.
But the thing is, interestingly, there is a point where it gets so bad for Rimmer that he actually tries to imagine the exit to escape.
Yes,
like that's what you could do in the first book. You could imagine an exit, but he realizes when he does, he runs into it and he can't leave because it has to be. He realizes, oh no, it's got to be a group effort after all.
But see, that's the thing as well. That's the part that didn't really work for me either, because they tell you it was the cat and Lister. He entered it. Then Rimmer went in to try and get them out. Then Crichton went in to try and get them out. So the four of them didn't go in together, so they had to leave together.
Well, no, but they were interlinked in terms of like...
They were interlinked, but they could still go in separately. So the fact that they could come out, they had to come out together. That didn't quite work because, yes, they were interlinked, but implying that one couldn't come out unless all four came out, even though they were interlinked. That's the part I didn't quite get. Because if you can go in separately to the same, then why would you be stuck in it once you're in and only be able to come out when everybody else came out? You see what I mean? So, like, for instance, if that could be fine, but if Rimmer or Crichton decided never to come out of it because it's not going to affect their bodies, then the other two are dead. Yes, I can understand why they went down that route, but that didn't even make sense either. But it was the fact that they had to come out together. Didn't quite make sense.
Right.
See, I would have preferred is that he did get caught before he got through the thing and didn't bounce off. And he had to concentrate so much to get the thing. And it was only because he was fearing for his life. But once he got away from Tonto, then, or Jimmy, it was Tonto, wasn't it? No, it was Jimmy.
They both die in the end, though, don't they?
Yes, the both of them die. But so to me, the way I would have done it is he is so fearful that he finally manages to get the exit, and as he's running towards it, he gets tackled by Tonto, and the gate goes because he's not got that concentration. And once Tonto dies, then he's not got that fear for his life again. Then he tries to, and he's just can't get it. Then he has to go and get him and think that way. That's the way I would have done it, because they all come in. They come in separately. So I would have said, well, they could leave separately, but it's just his mind's not allowing him to get the exit until the point where he was actually in fear of death, and his mind knew that he needed to get out because that's the only way. But it stops him by stopping him going through it, not him going to it and bouncing back, and then he just can't get that exit again. And that's the way it would have just had to be. He would have had to put his life in danger each time for the exit to appear. So what he does is the easy one is go and get the rest of them, and they all go out together because it will be easier. That's the way I was thinking of it, but I know I can be a wee bit.
Well, they wanted a kind of an impetus for Rimmer to need to seek out Lister.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But there's the impetus there. The fact that he couldn't get through the door, the fact that he had to be so terrified, and considering it's Rimmer, he's never going to get himself into such a state that he thinks his life's in danger. So he's never going to get that height again to picture the exit.
No. The thing is, there's like a huge scene between. But there's a huge kind of time lapse between that and when he reaches Bedford Falls. So he could, if he could leave the game, he could leave the game any point there. So they wanted kind of to explain why he had to reach Lister before he could leave the game.
Yeah, so but that's what I'm saying. If you look at I suppose the bit I was looking at, that he could only get the gate when he was so terrified that his life that he pictured the gate, but he rushed it forward. That instead of him bouncing back off it, Tonto intercepts him and grabs him just as the police turn up. So Tonto intercepts him, and the gate disappears. The police kill Tonto, and Rimmer gets away. He tries to picture a gate, and because he's no fear, he just somehow can't get it. So he realizes that he would only there's only two ways to do it. One is put himself in such terror of his life that he could get the gate, but as Rimmer, he's never going to put himself in danger, or get all the guys together and try and get out that way. So it would have been the impetus to get him to Rimmer, but without actually saying, oh, they have to come out together. That's what I'm saying, is that's the way I would have phased it, in such a way that his mind won't let him create a gate unless he's so terrified and in danger, whereas he's never going to do things to put him in that state. Do you see what I mean? That's what I was saying. It would have been a way to do it in such a way that he still had to go and search for them, because he's too much of a coward to put himself in so much danger just to try and get out.
Well, see, if there was one point that annoyed me about the Trixie LaBouche stuff, it was the political stuff when
Yes.
we're trying to say, but now like Rimmer's a woman, he's experienced what it's like to be a woman, and he's like at first I thought, okay, yeah, that's plausible. He's with these two scumbags who are basically gonna
Yes.
still smack him around because he's
But Rimmer might have disrespected women, shall we say, but he'd never slapped him around.
Yeah, that was kind of where I felt it was kind of
Yes.
It went into the realms a bit of agenda.
Yeah.
Well, pushing a political, kind of almost. It got a bit partisan.
Yes,
Kind of
very, very, very so. Right, Sadako, could you bam for 2 seconds? Something's just cropped up. It'll only take me 2 seconds. Could you?
Sorry, take over.
I take over just for 2 seconds. I need to step away from my mic for about
all right.
30 seconds at the most, but I don't want to leave it silent.
All right.
Just
Okay.
explain to the guys where we got to.
Right,
catch them. Right.
Okay. Okay. See you in a bit. Right. So that was the Rimmer segment. The Rimmer segment was that he got in financial trouble, he got jailed, and then he had to escape, but he ended up in the wrong body, and so he ended up in the body of Trixie LaBouche, this prostitute. So basically, he ends up stealing a juggernaut and ends up heading to Bedford Falls, where Lister is having his. He's basically, that's his idyllic life. Is that he got back to Earth. He found a place called Bedford Falls that was just like the Bedford Falls in the movie It's a Wonderful Life, and he was married to Christine Kochanski. But he ended up married to what turned out to be supposedly a very direct descendant of the Christine Kochanski. And so basically that's when the Rimmer loses control of the juggernaut, and so it basically crashes into the town. You couldn't do that today because it'd be too reminiscent of terrorism. I must admit, when I read that bit, I did get a bit of a lot to my stomach. I thought, no, this is almost a bit too close to reality now.
Yes, I did. I must admit, I agreed with that. It was the first thing I thought when I actually read that part. No way on earth they could actually even do something as a joke like that.
No, it wasn't as. Obviously, it was played just light enough that it wasn't as.
Well, nobody died, which, considering the way they mentioned it,
yeah,
because it did mention about the population of Bedford Falls, which will be so out of date. I think they said soon will be out of date, implying that a lot of people are going to die. That's what they implied with that.
Well, I think in the end it was more that everyone moved out because they basically ruined their entire shopping district, and he ruined their livelihoods, and basically, like everyone, it just completely destroyed the community. Because when Trixie steps out, Lister completely loses his name. It's like it is basically everyone just thinks of him as dirt from that point on. It's like he can't kind of
and also things that are starting to happen to the town, the nuclear waste dump, the open prison for violent criminals, the Air Force base, stuff like that. It was thinking about just. You think about the way they worded it. They talked about population 3,400 something, which will soon be out of date. And then the carolers are singing and the juggernaut's heading towards them. You knew what they were implying, but they obviously sideswiped that and then went a different route. But they were definitely implying, I think if they didn't wuss out, I think they would have done that. But they've decided, I think, no, we can't actually have all these people get killed by one of our main characters, no matter what.
Well, in Meltdown, they were fine about it, weren't they? Just have Rimmer kind of destroy the entire population of the planet.
Yeah, but that was you look at it, it's basically, as I said, they're only androids.
Yeah.
Whereas if yes, they're only computer generated characters, but at that point you're still saying, well, he actually wiped out all these people who people thought were real.
Yeah.
And it's just that I thought they wouldn't go down that route. but it was very reminiscent of things that had happened in the last few years after that book was written. Yes, they couldn't do that now.
No. Well,
So,
I mean, the thing is, my mum said she didn't like that bit because of the fact that it was a woman driver who and the fact that it basically was it was because her stiletto got caught on the pedal or something. She said that
her 18-inch stiletto got caught under the pedal, and he says, "Why didn't you drive barefoot?" She says, "I couldn't reach the pedals. I'm only 5 foot odds."
Yeah.
Yes. I can understand why people didn't like that, but I can't really say much about it because I think I'm a great driver, but everybody else doesn't.
All right. So basically, now this is the thing, because Lister knows he has to leave the game, but he's still protesting that he'd rather stay.
Yes, because as he said, he's got nothing outside the game.
Yeah.
Nothing. Because what has he got? He's on his own. Might as well live his life. But even though it's killing him, he might as well just live it in here. At least he's happy till he dies. Whereas out there, what's he got? He's the last man.
Well, the thing is, he's got he still has the Nova 5, though. He can still make the trip home.
Yes, but in effect, still 3 million years in the future, they don't know what they're going back to. So that's the aspect of it. Is he going to go back and suddenly there's the human race has changed so much that he's not part of it anymore?
Yeah. Well, that's the interesting. Well, that's interesting for later, isn't it?
Yeah.
So basically, they all wake up, don't they? Because basically,
there's a part you need to actually go back to before they wake up, and that's the cat story.
Oh yeah, because the
cat story makes the cat more cat-like, but also makes the cat character less endearing.
Is that because the Valkyries all rebel because they say we don't want to be your sex slaves anymore?
No, the fact is the cat has got his island with a castle which is surrounded by milk, which fine, but he's got his 12 or so Valkyrie sex slaves, which they mention about doing noisy acts upon him. But it's also the fact is he hunts dogs. He plays small animal polo, so they're a bit more torturing of small animals in the cat's world.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. It makes them more cat-like, but it makes them less endearing. That's why they didn't do stuff like that in the TV show. Because no matter what, anybody hunting other small animals, doesn't matter if it's done out of humour, I think the cat would have not been as fun.
Well, that's the thing is, though, that stuck out to me a bit because the book only has the Lister get to know the cat for a short while, and then he sees this really horrible side to him in the game. And it's like, I was thinking, you know what, maybe that's a bit too much considering that we haven't really seen Lister and the cat properly bond in the book like we did on TV.
Yeah. I think so, but I still think just the way the cat is portrayed in the TV show, he is self-centered and stuff like that. Yeah. Yes, we are aware he's a cat, but I think if they'd done anything at all like that, it would have been less endearing. That the cat would have been there because it would have put people right off. There you go, Windology. That would have put me right off. The fact is, the cat was playing small animal polo, so he's belting it and it's squeak as it's getting hit. He's playing, he's going out and he's hunting and he's actually shooting all the dogs. But it's less endearing, but you can understand from a cat side that that's just the way the cats are.
Well, do you think in some ways there's a commentary on the fact that, well, this is basically someone doing what humans do in terms of hunting, but they're hunting dogs. We don't really like to think of dogs being hunted the same way that maybe I mean, obviously there are people who think it's acceptable to hunt certain types of animal.
Yeah.
And this is almost saying, well, wait a minute, why is that any different?
Yeah, but I quite agree, because hunting, unless you're hunting for food,
Yeah.
then, like for instance, I know a guy who he used to go shooting. So he would go up to a lot of the farms, and the farmers would pay him a bullet per rabbit carcass, because the rabbits obviously were undermining the crops. They were eating a lot of the crops, and they didn't obviously want to spray the crops to kill the rabbits. So getting the hunters in. But what he would do is not just going out and shooting rabbits just for the sake of shooting them for hunting. He would bring it all home, and we would all get rabbit stew, bits of rabbit. So he would bring it back for food.
Oh.
So he would go hunting as part and parcel, and he would hunt rabbits, wild rabbits that the farmers were wanting to get rid of, and they'd set traps. They didn't want to put poisons down, but there's still traps for them and stuff like that to try and stop them. Whereas the shooting them was probably a bit more humane. But he didn't just shoot them. He didn't go out and shoot 50 and then bring 2 or 3 back for food. What he would do is go out, and if he shot 10, then he would bring 10 back. He would gut them and prepare them, and then everybody would get some rabbit that they could take home and cook, because he'd bring them into work, and we would either cook them in work or take them home and cook them. So he did it for food. He didn't just hunt for the sake of hunting. He also ate what he killed, which is to me, if you're hunting and you're eating what you're killing, that's fine. But if you're just going out hunting to shoot just for a trophy, or just to say, look what I've shot, no, I must admit, I disagree with that. Like pack hunting for foxes. Sorry, I would rather have somebody with a rifle shoot a fox rather than it getting ripped apart and terrified by a pack of dogs.
Yeah.
So hunting is one thing if you're going to eat what you kill.
Well, but the thing is, like, this is kind of all 3 of them have got all 4 of them have got very different kind of fantasies. Like,
yes,
Rimmer's is the avarice fantasy.
Yes, the Mr. Egotistical. He wanted to prove everybody wrong, and everybody who were lusting after him were all the ones that basically would turn him down, or he was too scared to ask because they would have turned him down. All these golfers and drivers were his dad or his brothers, or people who were people he'd known from school. It's like highly educated.
It's like when his dad's driving him, chauffeuring, I'm very proud of you, son. Oh, shut up, Dad! Like,
yes, he went back in time to revive his dad so he could get him to drive around.
Yeah. But so Lister's fantasy is all altruistic. It's all, look, I don't want anything big or material. I just want a quiet life, and I want to be part of a good community. It's like, it's all kind of
he wanted Christine, he wanted his family, and he wanted a community he could belong to.
Whereas Cat's fantasy is all id, isn't it? It's all
him.
Yeah, it's all. Well, it's basically it's basically just
narcissistic.
Well, it's very base, isn't it? It's all it's not about status or anything. It's just about getting. It's about gratification, isn't it?
Yeah,
and it's just kind of very dark. So yeah, it's just his is just kind of a very nasty fantasy, isn't it? It's all kind of
yes. But it's also a very narcissistic fantasy because it does all centre around him and his needs and wants.
Yeah, well, it's more. Yeah, I mean, no one ever condemns him for what he does.
Just laughing at the captain. That's his.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is mine. That's mine. Yep. But
I did think it was funny. I thought it was funny in the first book when they actually find the cat's castle, and like Rimmers still wants to believe that they've really reached Earth and he really is this successful. And then he sees the castle and says all his protestations that this was real kind of went gurgling down the toilet because the cat.
How did the cat deserve all that? But he didn't.
Well, it's not just that he didn't deserve it; it was also that it was just so implausible, and it didn't need to be plausible for the cat because for the cat this was plausible. It's like, you know,
Yeah. But that's thing, and then obviously you've got Crichton, who had his door and saw just some dirty dishes and just thought he would actually wash them.
and he
And
was still there 6 months later.
8 months later, they were still there. See,
Yeah.
that's the thing. See, when I'll leave it until they actually get out the game.
Okay.
Because there's a couple of gripes with that, and the 8 months later and the 2 years and stuff like that. But they get out the game. They eventually decide that they have to because the Cat's Island's about to be destroyed because the Valkyries are all on strike. The moat is turning bad. The milk's is curdling, and there's a volcano, and the lava's flowing down towards him. And Crichton, his mop head's broken, so he can't clean anything. So they decide to leave.
By the way, the bit is where Cat's asking, "Where are the Valkyries?" and Crichton says, "They formed the Valkyrie Sex Slave Liberation Movement and left for the mainland." It's like, they what? Yes, they were sick and tired of bowing to your every woman desire. It's like, why? Well, if you're part of my directors, it's fairly obvious, isn't it? Like,
aye. The Cat still didn't see it as anything wrong.
Yeah, it's like, because they ask him, well, didn't you think it was strange that you discovered this perfect life? It's like, no, I just thought I deserved it.
Yeah, it is, and it does highlight the Cat's darker side. His more, not just narcissistic, which we've already known about his narcissistic side, but his more nasty narcissistic side, where yes, we all know the Cat is all me, but it's me to the point where he's quite happy to have people indentured to him to do what he wants rather than just expecting things to be done for him. Like, for instance, juice monkeys eat off the floor, so he's expecting the food and he wants it on the table, but just because Lister didn't know and put it in the ground by mistake, he's still getting fed, he's still getting shown how to get his own stuff and what he wants. A lot of the time he's creating what he wants, like the suits. He makes his own outfits and stuff like that. It's not a case of, yes, they've all got Crichton to do their ironing and bits and pieces like that, but this is just a bit more nasty, whereas the Cat's got slaves. And to do what he wants, and to do mention a lot about his sex with them, and bit over the top, I must admit, but I can understand why they didn't have it in the TV show.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in basically Rimmer's effect, whenever he gets close to one of the others, their life starts going down the toilet as well, because that's what Rimmer's subconscious does. And because the game's interlinked, so basically his subconscious will go with them. And I think basically that's, in a way, I think it's also because his subconscious wants to create scenarios where he's blamed for it all.
Yes. But do you know, actually see when it came to the Cat, I actually thought, that teaches you. Because obviously in the TV show, to me, it was the Cat that triggered it the last time. This time it's Rimmer triggering it, and he's getting his own back on the alternate reality version of the Cat triggering it in theirs.
Because like with Lister doesn't feel like he deserves it. It feels like he wanted all he wanted was a perfect life, and it was ruined. So like you really feel for Lister when all goes wrong, but at the same time, Rimmer has done him a favor because Lister does need to escape the game.
Yes, of course. And then when they do escape the game, everything's just hunky dory.
Wow, too hunky dory. Too hunky
dory that they realise that they're still in the game.
Yeah.
And I thought it was quite good. I thought it was a bit weird, but I thought it was quite good the way they did it, because there's the most addictive game that you think you're out, but you're not. You're still addicted to it. And then when you realise you're not out, you get the designer popping up and saying, "Congratulations, you've won a free turn." It didn't cost them to actually get into the game, so offering them a free go was to me it was a bit weird, but it was the same again. Most people, oh, free, is it?
Yeah.
It's then they would be back in the same spot because once you've got the game, you've got it. It doesn't mean you have to pay to get into it, but offering them a free replay, and you're sitting there thinking why, and it's because it's an addictive game. It's to try and keep you in it.
Well, do you think maybe it was because Rimmer cocked it up and they were saying basically you can have a second go or something?
No, I actually think it was. I think it was actually that part was not to do with Rimmer at all. I think it was just the fact is the game mechanics, because it was designed to be highly addictive.
Yeah.
The people who think they get out, it takes them back to reality, which isn't quite, and it still keeps them going. Eventually, we drag them back in again. Yeah. Whereas they've found it, and then the next one is somebody coming up acknowledging you're right, well done, and you've won a chance to get another free rego.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there thinking, it'd be people saying, oh, another game, great stuff, and then go back into it again. So it's a way of getting them addictive personalities back in by offering them it for free, considering they've already got it for free, as it were. Even if they had to pay for it initially, going back in the second time is not going to cost them anymore. But offering them for a free replay.
Yeah.
And I thought it was just the addictive aspect of it to try and get the addictive ones in. So there's you think you're out, but you're not. Then you get another opportunity to get out, but they offer you something free. And you know what it's like. Addictive personalities, they just hear the word free and they go, oh. So they'll catch people like that. And I think that's what it was. It was just the addictive aspect of the game. Try to get them back in.
Yeah.
So I didn't think that was a Rimmer thing. I think that was actually the game's designers. Why they would make something so addictive it would kill you is one thing, but the fact that it is so addictive, they're just trying to keep you in.
Well, I think it was an important scene because it's a perfect contrast to when they actually do wake up.
Yes,
because when
they wake up, it annoys me.
Well, the thing is, it makes sense. Because it's like this, once they wake up and they realize how weakened they've become, it basically eliminates any question of, is this going to be tempted back? Because it's like, no, I see what I've actually done to myself now. I'm not going to go back.
Yes. However, remember the time frame.
It's 2 years on, isn't it?
2 years they've been in the game.
Yeah.
14 of those, 16 months of that, Holly was looking after them. Who was looking after them for the 8 months Holly was in the game? Feed, water, anything.
The Scudders, maybe? I don't know.
The Scudders were basically down playing cards. It sounded like they weren't actually paying any attention but you see what I mean? The 8 months, do you know how they could have got around that? The biosuits that they put them in after they got them out of it. Why didn't Crichton have them in the biosuits to look after them while they were in it? Because that would have kept them nourished by keeping their bodies fed. And because if somebody's in a coma, they can't eat or drink, so they would have, the bodysuits must be the similar idea that keep fluid flowing and nutrients flowing. So why didn't Crichton put them in that? And when they came out, they see the state of them hanging in these suits. It would have still been as impactful, but it would have actually justified how Crichton hadn't been there for 8 months and they still survived. Because they mention it in the first book about how the reason the girl had survived is because the bliss fiend had actually been feeding her and keeping her alive. So there's nobody to keep the two of them alive. So how did they survive 8 months? With no water, no food. You see what I mean? That was just a wee trip up. Whereas they mentioned getting them into these bodysuits which help rehydrate them and keep the nutrients flowing. Why wouldn't have Crichton put them in one of them, hang them up still while they're in the game to keep them alive? So when he goes in, it would have, at least they were still being looked after.
Well, another way they could have maybe got around it is maybe if they'd actually, if it had been a time dilation effect, like maybe time passed in the game isn't the same as time passed in the real world.
It could have been, but it's just that it's Crichton is mentioned in the 8 months, so his chronometer knows how long he's been away, and then they also mention the 2 years when they're out. Crichton says for 16 months, because they said 2 years all in all, but he said he's been in the game for 8 months, so still leaves 16 months that he was actually not in the game looking after them.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's just a picky thing about that. And it's just something that if you think it, just a wee bit of hindsight, if they're reading the book and somebody says, how did they manage to survive 8 months without anybody looking after them? They could have gone, oh, aye. Well, see those bodysuits that they put him in after the fact. Why didn't Crichton put him in that while he's looking after them?
Mm-hmm.
And it keeps them alive at least. They just needed to get them out, and then he goes in. They're already being fed and watered, as it were, so they don't need to worry about that. And that's just that wee aspect of it. A wee silly thing like coming back and mention that it changes the biosuit because it's been on them for 8 months. Yeah. It's keeping them alive now. They need actually a better treatment. It's just something like that could have made it a wee bit more sensible. Yeah, that's all. It's just basically it's the wee silly things my mind picks up.
Yeah.
So, and that is a quarter of the book, and they're just out. Which I must admit, in rereading, I was a bit more disappointed than when I first read it, because obviously you want initially when I first read it, I was expecting it all to be about Better Than Life. But the stories all flowed together, so it was actually all one big story. So it didn't seem as if it split up. But now I feel as if it was a bit more split than it needed to be.
Well, I mean, how do you think maybe they could have? I mean, how much more do you think they could have done with the Better Than Life thing?
I think they could have actually had a bit more. I think of them, the struggle to get out. Whereas a lot of the things they were very generic about Lister's life, because they just gave you the very basics of It's a Wonderful Life. They didn't actually go into a bit more detail about his kids, because they just mentioned his kids and yes, they're 2 and they're speaking and they're doing that. It's a wee bit weird, and they just went on and basically how they're going to get the toys and stuff like that. It's just
it was a contrast to but it was kind of a contrast to his life on Red Dwarf, wasn't it? That was the main thing.
Yes, but the contrast was there. But I think what they could have done to extend it is actually having a bit more storytelling of Lister in that environment, rather than them just talking as if he's George from the movie, which just means that if you know the movie, then we don't need to explain him in that situation. Just assume it's just George. That's what I was meaning. Whereas I would have liked to have seen the way you see Lister in Rimmer in his environment. I would have liked to see Lister in his environment for longer.
Right.
The cat you didn't need anymore, because the cat was the cat, so it didn't need to actually be explained anymore, because it was his narcissistic fantasies. They would all be the same. Whereas Lister, I would have liked to see how a couple of days in Bedford Fort, how he justifies to himself about it constantly being Christmas Eve and going around the same thing each day, every day. Do you see what I mean? That's what I would have liked to have seen, rather than it just mention it. I would have liked to see how his mind justifies it, how he communicates with people who every day is Christmas Eve, but they wake up and it's still Christmas Eve. How his mind would have justified it with the people he interacted with from that town. That's what I was meaning. I would have liked to see a bit more of Lister world. Whereas we saw plenty of Rimmer's world, but I don't think we saw enough of Lister's world.
Yeah.
But as I know, as I keep saying, I know I can be a wee bit picky with things. I enjoy the book. Don't get me wrong. I'm not picking on it because I didn't like it. I enjoy the book, but I just find things like that are incongruous with common sense.
Mm-hmm.
The incongruity between the two. I think that's all it is. My mind just actually picks these wee silly things and it digs and digs and digs. It's basically, it's like scratching your hand. Eventually you'll scratch it enough that it actually recuts. I just pick, 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 pick. But I can't help myself.
Mm-hmm.
But I did like the better than life aspect of it. But when they get out, something else has happened, which was a sub-story.
Yeah, there was Holly decided to bring the because everyone was because everyone was in the game. Basically, Holly decided to the best company could have was basically plug in Talkie Toaster. Now, the Talkie Toaster in the book is a lot more obnoxious than the TV version.
A lot more. I did notice that. Yes, the bits and pieces where you see the constantly asking for a bit of toast, do you want some more toast? There, you're a waffle man. You think they're funny, but you can't really understand why they seem to have it in for it. Like, for instance, he punches it when it asks him if you would like some toast, or even given the life, the universe, and everything, would you like some toast? And no, and all that. Yes, you can. In the book, you understand why it's unplugged, it's smashed, it's in the garbage department. Whereas anytime you see Talkie Toaster on TV, people cheer because it's funny and it's not too obnoxious.
Yeah.
People keep saying it's obnoxious, but it doesn't come across as obnoxious. But in the book, it's extremely obnoxious.
Yes.
And you can understand why it gets smashed up.
Yeah, it was indeed.
But it basically somehow manages to help Holly not only get his IQ back, but this is the one from, I'm trying to remember, was it White Hole that Holly got her thing with, or was it another one?
White Hole was the one, basically the experiment. Now on TV, the idea was that the toaster had been smashed up because he'd been basically annoyed listening too much, and Crichton had reprogrammed him, but basically he'd used, basically because he knew he could compress their he could restore their intelligence, but he could restore them to their original IQ, but at the cost of reducing the lifespan.
Yeah, he did Talkie Toaster as a test. That's right.
Yeah. And then basically they did the same to Holly because they wanted to get her brilliance back, but they overestimated and basically gave her double the IQ, but only about like 3 minutes runtime. Yeah,
and you notice that was a big change between the original and the TV show, because all she did was got her intelligence back to 6,000. She didn't double it.
No, she did on TV. She did. It was 12,000.
Was it? I can't remember. I thought she just got her intelligence back to 6,000.
No, she got it to 12,000. That's why she was able to work out the pool thing. The basically the stellar engineering in terms of how to get the
it just goes to show I missed that. I just thought they'd actually got her back to her normal intelligence.
No, she was kind of superhumanly intelligent in fact, like you could tell, it kind of made her more of a snob because, like,
yes,
I just love that bit in the TV when she's trying to explain, no time to explain. Like, River's like, come again, and she goes, "You're a total smeghead, aren't you, River?"
Yes, but it was the same as in this one where it's Holly basically realised he's only got 3 minute odds. He switched himself off. Then he switched himself back temporarily just to say 2 words. And he turned to Talkie Toaster, "You bastard."
Yeah, that's the one, yeah. Because it was Talkie Toaster's idea. He'd done the reading he'd read up on how he can do intelligence compression.
Yes.
Because basically Talkie Toaster was kind of like, food was basically toast was a forbidden topic, politics was a forbidden topic, and I think religion was
as well. So
basically Talkie, I think, came to decide, well, I'm going to read up and basically I'm going to be able to tell Holly this about how to compress his intelligence.
Yeah. But
So
they got it wrong and doubled his intelligence.
Yeah.
And exponentially reduced his lifespan.
Yes.
But which brings us back to, so that's white hole, which in this one it's a black hole rather than a white hole.
Later, yeah.
Yeah. So when they wake up, everything's dead.
Yeah.
Everything. So they want to go through the restart process of the engines, which takes 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And they find there's a planet heading towards them, and it'll probably crash into them in about 3 weeks.
Yep.
So it's a tight thing. And yet again, like the Nova 5, it's Rimmer's competitive instinct that screws him over again.
Oh,
and with the Nova 5, he was competing with himself to build it to the point he actually broke it more.
Yeah, because basically in the first book, they actually recover Crichton's ship and they try to reconstruct it because they think if they can reconstruct it, they can use the duality drive on it to reach Earth, because the duality drive is a more advanced technology and it can basically fold space so they can leapfrog across the universe.
And then in the book, they're basically the crew go out to find the material they need for the fuel, and they leave the 2 Rimmers to rebuild the Nova 5, which is ripped in 2, and their competitiveness makes it worse. Then eventually they basically get it better, but they destroy most of the scutters in the process.
I think it's 0. I think there's no scutters left after that.
I think there was 3. I think it was 3. Was there not? 3 burnt out scutters or something like that, they said.
And I think the only scutters that survived were the scutters who went with Lister and Cat. They came back and all the rest were dead because of...
Yeah, they'd burnt out. But I think they said it was 3. But even at that, they'd burnt out most of them because they were over-competing with themselves. And in the same in this one, the Crichton and Rimmer had to restart the engine. So they had to check each of the pistons and then fire it, test it and fire it. And Rimmer's got 2 groups of 20 scutters to help him. Yeah. So he thinks they're already ahead. So he tests 2 of the engines, piston 136 and piston 137. He goes to 138 and there's no scutters. Goes to 139, no scutters. Goes up to 150, no scutters. So he goes all the way back down. Can't find them anywhere, and he just notices on the base of a couple of them there's that wafer thin sheet of metal.
Right.
And then he realised that he had actually fired the pistons while the scutters were in it, both shifts. Yeah. And he can't even blame anybody. So it's down to the realisation is that he screwed it up again by over-competing because he was trying to rush ahead because he knew he had to beat Crichton, even though he didn't need to beat Crichton because Crichton's a mechanoid would have accepted that he got beat anyway. Mm-hmm. It's just it's Rimmer's over competitiveness with things that don't matter screwed it up again.
Yeah.
Which I quite liked for the simple fact is it's Rimmer being Rimmer.
Well,
for no other reason than being Rimmer.
Well, I think that was kind of the main point was they wanted to kind of start once they woke to reality, they were immediately in jeopardy. The ship was dead and they were on collision course with a planet. So it's like, immediately they've got to kind of, then they've not just got to readjust to reality, they've got to readjust to how everything has gone to pot since they've slept. Yes. Which, so it's kind of, it is a way of making more of the plot than the game.
Yeah. And yes, it is. And there's bits and pieces from different episodes in it, like the Flintstones speech.
Yeah. That's when they're Cat and Lister
are sitting watching the Flintstones.
While they're, in this version is while they're, being rejuvenated in the bodies.
Biosuits. And on the TV show, they were just sitting in the bunk watching it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, but either way, it's still, you can see bits and pieces of thought, yep, that would be good in the book, or yep, that would be good in the TV show.
Well, see,
so whereas it's written first, I think they were writing the 2 of them together. And that's why some of them you see in the TV show, not in the book, because they're good visual gags. And I see where you've got ones in the book are not in the TV show because they're either a bit too dark or a bit too complicated that they couldn't show it on screen.
Well, the thing is, like, the bit that really hits home is when Lister, it's like, he says, I shouldn't have looked, but I did. I looked. It was basically, he knew he shouldn't have looked, but he looks to the cat, after they've just woken up, and he says the cat was almost unrecognizable.
Recognizable, yes.
And that hits home because you know what the cat looks like.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't imagine him in that state, but in the book, that's what happens.
Yeah.
In that deteriorated state, it's like, God, that's just not how you envision the cat. And it's like, be kind of, it shows the effect the game has had. It's completely.
Yes. Well, you look at it, Dwayne Dibley, or the polymorph cat that you find at the end of this book. Mm-hmm. No matter how the state they were in. So Dwayne Dibley, obviously not a state. He's just an iconic character. But the drunk or the drunk self-deprecating cat that you find at the end of this book, which was also in a TV show with polymorph.
Yeah,
you can't even imagine a cat in a worse condition. Yet the book, without actually really giving too much of a description, brings it right across how bad he looks.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes.
You know what I mean? And I quite liked that.
Right.
So I did, because it's the first time you actually, with as few words as possible, give you a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Because telling you didn't want to look at him because of the state, and then he talks about just looking at him and just describing him, just very basic description. It wasn't a lot of detail, but it was enough that you could think, wow.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Because they were just talking about how his eyes looked too big for his face, so that's how sunk his face was look. So even a very brief description, it still gave a lot of information across, which I thought was hence the reason why I think they could not have done that on the TV show, because they couldn't have had the graphics to justify it, or it's too dark to put on a family show. You imagine watching a kid watching something like that.
Yeah.
It would have been too much. Well, Professor Mamet?
Yep.
And the vaccine one.
No, Dr. Landstrom you're thinking of.
Dr. Landstrom. So there you go. You've got one that's in some states. So they can get away with some ones that are some state, but there's a difference between over-the-top zombified or over-the-top ill. I think would have been too distressing. It would have gone the opposite way, whereas Dr. Landstrom being a wee bit... Was Dr. Landstrom not the holovirus?
She was, yeah.
I'm not talking about the one where I'm talking about epidemiology.
Oh, that was Carmen.
Was it Carmen, right? So it's
Miss Carmen, yeah.
Aye. So it's her member. She basically, as you said, Frenched with a zombie with a tongue coming off. So yes, you've got, there you go. You've got the one with the holovirus and the one with the virus.
I love when Lister says, like, I've been tongue hawking you to death
by Tutankhamun's grandmother.
Yeah.
But I mean, so they do have ones that can be a bit over the top scary for kids.
Yeah.
But could they have something that's over the top distressing for kids, like the state of the cat after that? No, I don't think they could. So I could understand why they didn't do it in the TV show, where in the book they could still do it minimalistically, and it still could be quite ouch.
But in Doctor Who, they did something similar to that in Mordred Undead and Terminus, and that was still meant to be family viewing, wasn't it?
Yes, but remember, there's a slight difference. If this Red Dwarf is more of a comic sitcom, a sci-fi comic sitcom, whereas Doctor Who is a fantasy sci-fi, so it's meant to have scares in it and stuff like that. So I don't think... If you're going into Red Dwarf, you're expecting to laugh and joke. You're not expecting to be not so much scared, but a wee bit traumatized. Where in Doctor Who, you're expecting the jump scares, you're expecting the bits of trauma in it because it's meant to get that reaction. So at the end, you get the smile of, hey, they've destroyed the monsters. So you're meant to have that bit of empathy for the people who died or the jump scares. So whereas in Red Dwarf, it's meant to be humorously, even if it's horror, it's still funny horror. Like, for instance, the Carmen being tongued to death by Tutankhamun's granny. So there you've got a zombie, and then they make a joke with it.
The funniest one for me is when they're actually exploring Dr. Landstrom's base, and like they come across that the warning signs like wear biosuits, and then it shows an image from Alien of like the creature escaping from the body, like Cass like just immediately put his hand in. Oh God! And it's like no, it's like Kurt Cry's like nope. The side, don't worry, the side scan would have detected any viruses. And then he hits it. It's like it's not working. It's like, and we're going to live.
Yes, and also the part when they're getting chased with Dr. Landstrom and said, "Do we ever come across anybody that doesn't try and kill us in the first couple of minutes?"
Yeah.
So they do come across it, but that's what I'm saying. They have the humour where the parts, instead of being horror or they have the humour with it, because you see the bit where it could be, yes, they could their skins could explode with the viruses, and then they make the joke about you should have already been wearing one or else this is going to happen, and they make a joke about finding out as they're with everybody else. And it's just funnier because you realise how bad it could be, but obviously, as a comedy, they're setting up that it's not going to be
it's kind of
traumatizing or too scary.
Well, it's kind of like it's funny because of just the depth of misfortune they're in. It's a bit like kind of thing.
Like for instance, no polymorph. Crichton becomes human.
Yeah.
Remember the machine, and it says a zombie, a skeleton with 3 heads fell through Rimmer's light bee. He now knows what a brown the shirt tails are for.
Yeah.
So the Bakes take something that could have been shocking and throw a joke in there. So it's it's more humorous than scary. And I think that's what Red Dwarf is. So I can understand why they didn't put the cat like that in the TV show. In the book, they can. It's the same as, like, as I said, if you look at the TV show and the books side by side, you can look at the book and say, I can understand why that's not in the TV show. But you look at the TV show and say, I can understand why that's not in the book, because it's a visual joke.
Yeah.
And it'll be harder to explain in a book, whereas if it's visual, it's dead simple.
Well, speaking of which, we should probably talk about the Holly's plan of the feat of astronavigation, of how to escape the planet, basically.
Yes.
It's oh yes.
The polymorph episode had a warning at the start, but I think it was very tongue-in-cheek because if I remember right, it had a stupid line at the end of that. I'll need to actually remember what it was. I think it was a case of something along the lines of, not "you've been warned, but here we go again," or something like that. So it had a humorous twist on it.
It was.
I need to remember it.
I think it was "you have been warned," but I think it was more a publicity stunt than a joke.
I think the fact is "you have been warned" was the humorous aspect of it, because it's a case of well, you can't say we've not told you. It's that it was almost the "you've been warned" as in. So there you go. It's so instead of just leaving the warning there and get into it, being a bit more of a publicity stunt, but "you've been warned. So whatever happens, it's your fault." That's what I took to it. The humorous twist to it was "you've been warned. Come ahead." You know what I mean?
Right. So
so Holly's increased and they're hurtling towards the planet. Or the planet's hurtling towards them. They're trying to get the ship up and running again.
The only option is to abandon ship, so they have to. So Rimmer decides he's going to basically tell Holly goodbye and tell him what's happened. And when he does, yeah, and because of that, basically Holly calculates a plan by which they can deflect the planet.
Yes,
it's like in White Hole. It's like they fire a thermonuclear device into the sun. Sun knocks the planet out of orbit. It knocks the other planet out of orbit, and basically the planet misses them.
Yes, but did you not notice the bit where Rimmer's actually trying to say cheerio to Holly? It was a bit of a twist on Holly explaining to Rimmer about how much time he's left.
Oh.
Because Holly they switch Holly on and says IQ 120 or IQ restored. Because I think it was IQ restored, life diminished to less than 2 minutes, and then switches off, and no time, and then off, and they keep putting her back on, and she keeps repeating it, and he says, explain it, and she says the same words, just slower, so you could pick it up, and then he goes, oh, turn yourself off, oh, really? And he switches her off, whereas this one, he writes a three-page speech and realizes he has to get it down to under 5 seconds, and it's a case of heading to black hole.
No, not the black hole yet.
No, it's planet inbound, collision. We're abandoning the ship. Sorry, goodbye. And that was it. But he said it so fast he could get it down to 3 seconds, so Holly could have the rest of his 2 minutes or less than 2 minutes to live his life. So he puts it on and goes, and what? And what? And he repeats it each time, and the 4th time he's repeating it, Holly says, I can't understand a word you say, slow down. Yeah. So Rimmer has to do the exact same as Holly did, which I thought was quite good, because when Holly did it in the TV show, you're thinking, Rimmer's an absolute smeckhead for not understanding that. Yet there's the overly intelligent Holly having to say, slow down.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there thinking, he was doing it that fast just to save you time. But he said the exact same word slower, and the Holly goes, oh. And it was basically, that's obviously they didn't have that in the TV show, but they had it in the book. But it was a complete juxtaposition to the first time. Holly having to do it dead slow for Rimmer. Now Rimmer's having to do it dead slow for Holly. I thought it was a good juxtaposition, but it was sort of passed over, and I thought that would have been funnier because of the way they treated Rimmer initially. And they basically called him a smeckhead before he switches himself off. Don't worry, take your time, 1 minute and counting, that type of thing. Whereas when it's the other way around, Holly doesn't get any sarky comments put towards him, which I thought would have been sort of justified. It would have been a nice wee, got you back, because it's your fault this time, not mine. It's just because the two of them were so similar. But from the opposite side. But Rimmer gets a take your time, as in smeckhead, and whereas Holly doesn't get that for doing the exact same thing. But it was good because there you go, there's the most intelligent being on the ship, as in the ship itself, and it still couldn't actually, it had to be slowed down for him. Because he could have actually recorded that and played that back numerous times in a split second and understood it, but he just kept going, what? You know what I mean? So there's that aspect of it I just found funny. I liked that, but obviously they didn't do that in the TV show. They did it in the book, and I thought it didn't have a payoff. It would have been nice.
Yeah.
But that's just one of those things I noticed.
Well, it was kind of funny, but it was still about showing the jeopardy of the. Like, Holly doesn't have long to live.
Yes, but he didn't have long to live, and they felt sorry that they're going to have to abandon him.
Yeah,
but it obviously comes up with a plan. Yeah, which I must admit, if I was on the ship unlike the cat and Crichton has to follow the human, which he only does that when it suits him.
Oh,
well, you think about it, even in the TV show or whatever. Crichton has Rimmer has him doing things, even though Lister tells him, "Just sit down and put your feet up." "I can't, sir. He's the most senior." Da 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 da. Yet he turns around and says he has to follow the orders of the human over a computer generated one. So there's times he says he has to follow the orders of the most senior one there, but other times he says he doesn't because the human is more important than anything else. It's the two of them are sort of counterproductive. They're basically they're not an oxymoron. It's a
paradox.
Paradox.
Well, I mean, to a degree, Rimmer is a dependent, so Crichton has to provide for him. It's like he's programmed to care for Rimmer, but he's still, in terms of how the humans rank, then Lister's still the human. He's the default human. The human has the ultimate rights, and because that's kind of that's a recurring theme in the book, is that basically the right status of the holograms is inferior to humans, the right status of Gelfs is inferior to humans, the right state of mechanoids is inferior to humans.
Yes, but you look at Body Swap.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah,
because I had to follow his orders because of it, that type of thing. Whereas there it is a case of, sorry, I have to follow the human. Everything else is lesser. So it's, you see what I mean? But I must admit, I would have actually said, no, I don't care how good you think you are at pool. I would go with the computer with an IQ of 12,000. Sorry, I don't care. That to me, even on the TV show, I thought that was just a wee bit ridiculous.
Right.
He's not put enough side in it and stuff like that. I just thought I always found that episode, that's the White Dwarf, or sorry, the White Hole story. I found it a wee bit ridiculous at the time. I enjoyed it. It was still humorous, but the whole concept of it was typical Red Dwarf. It's not something you would see a similar context in any other sci-fi.
The thing is, I mean, we're getting a bit ahead of the plot, but I do feel like what doesn't translate in the TV episode is the stakes, because in the TV episode they fall under the influence of the white hole, but the white hole doesn't seem dangerous.
It doesn't.
So it seems odd that they have to kind of take it out.
Yes, because the white hole, all that was doing was
making them repeat themselves.
Yeah, it was the coincidences, wasn't it? Yeah,
I think maybe the point was that whilst they were under the influence, then they couldn't move ahead in time because basically causality was it's like they were almost caught in a time loop, and that was kind of, they had to escape that because that's
because they would actually start a sentence and finish a sentence, but the bit in the middle they didn't know where it came from, and then it would appear later on.
Well, yeah, but it's more the case that they couldn't progress with time wasn't progressing. They were basically if they stayed close to the white hole, then they'd be stuck in a loop.
So all they needed to do effectively was move.
Yeah, but
it wasn't dangerous.
But like with in this, it was like it was basically the planet's going to kill them if they don't do something about the planet. Then they and then and obviously if the black hole's going to tear them apart, then they're going to be done for. But the black hole, that's later.
Yes, but it's just the fact is the decision making stuff and Crichton and stuff like that. I just always found it a bit weird with they would change it backwards and forwards. But yes, so we were at the planet coming towards him, and Holly spews out the information about how to resolve the issue.
Yeah.
Which I'm trying to think the best way of describing it. Well, apart from anything else, it's a pool shot. He's playing 4-dimensional pool with
Yeah.
planets.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that's the part I was saying about they decide. No, he says that he's going to do it because if that was done, that would actually be in somebody's that would be a table ripper and in somebody's pint. And I'm sitting there thinking, 4-dimensional pool with planets compared to actually getting a wee bit drunk and playing pool.
Do you mean because the stakes were bigger, it didn't make sense that Lister was so flippant about it?
Yes, well, it's not so much he's so flippant. It's the fact is he's sure he could do it because he can play pool.
Yeah,
because pool, no matter what, it's more 2-dimensional rather than 3-dimensional.
mm-hmm.
Because you're basically doing it on a flat plane.
Yeah,
but it's 2-dimensional. Yeah, he can think he could do 4-dimensional.
Yeah.
And that's where the part I thought was a bit ridiculous. That's like turning around somebody says they can actually
like on TV, you basically it looks like he's doing something stupid, but that kind of raises the stakes. It's like, look, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's overconfident that he thinks he can do it.
Yeah.
But at the end, he does it. He does a trick shot and it works.
Well, even that, the trick shot part, I wasn't going to tell you I was going to do a trick shot, but it's the whole premise behind it. That's what I was meaning.
Yeah.
The whole premise behind it. Because you look at a lot of the premises in Red Dwarf,
mm-hmm.
even the polymorph or marooned or even Better Than Life or Dave Trance's sister, the Sirens, all those bits and pieces. You take any one of those episodes, right, and take the premise from any of the episodes. You could put that in any other sci-fi show. Right, fair enough, you might have to take the humour out or you might have to change bits and pieces, but the premise could fit into most other sci-fi shows. Just tweaked a wee bit. You imagine that premise taken out where he thinks he could actually do it where a computer with an IQ of 12,000 couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. That premise to me is specifically Red Dwarf because I can't imagine any other sci-fi show having the premise of playing pool with planets. But also saying that I know I could do it because I play pool in a Saturday night down the club on a 2-dimensional board, whereas this is 4-dimensional.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It's like somebody who can sing a German lullaby. Just because they can sing a German lullaby doesn't mean they can actually calculate pi a fifth. It's that type of thing. The two of them are, to me, completely unrelated.
Yeah.
4-dimensional planet chess pool and 2-dimensional chess. It's just the two of them are completely separate. You see, I mean, that's to me, it's like that, and it's the premise just sort of didn't work for me. Weird.
Yeah. But so the way it plays out in the okay, nothing was on heading to bed early. Oh.
All right. Good night, Windology, and you stay well. Thanks for joining us.
Take care, Windology. Hope you're feeling better soon.
Yeah. Sorry, it's just I'd noticed Windology was just heading off, so I thought I'd pop that up. But yeah, it's the premise of it, I think, is a specific to Red Dwarf. I can't imagine any other sci-fi show having that premise.
Yeah.
But saying that, it's still funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's still extremely funny. But it has to get pushed to do it.
So the main difference in this version is that Lister and Rimmer go together alone because Cat stays behind because he
if they fail, they'll get at least 20 more minutes of life.
Yeah, because he's expecting Lister to fail, but he only voted for him because of the way he dressed.
Yes, that's the bit I was saying about how Crichton says he agrees with Rimmer, but he has to vote with Lister because he's the human and he has to follow the humans' directions. That's the bit where I was saying about how and other things, right? And then you've got the Cat saying, I completely agree with you, but I couldn't vote for somebody with your dress sense.
Yeah.
So he gets outvoted. But yes, the cat turns around and goes, "Well, if you succeed, nothing will change. If you fail, at least I'll get 20 more minutes than you will."
Yeah.
Which I liked considering. But yes, the two of them going back, and I like the idea that even though they're playing it, it's not like the show where it looks instantaneous. They talk about it like Rimmer sees it in instead of 8 hours, he feels like it's 8 years.
Yeah.
Whereas Lister says he looked at it and it felt like 8 seconds.
The best part is when there's a particular for 3 solid hours, none of them exchanged a word. That just kind of gives you the idea of the situation and the passage of time, as because this is basically what would happen if one planet was sent careening toward the other. It would basically take it. I mean, it's a twin system, so basically the planets are quite close together relatively. Yeah. But they're still not going to hit each other instantly. It's going to take hours for one to hit the other, at least.
Yeah.
And so what? Shall we talk about the verdict, the result? Yeah. So basically, Lister's trick shot gets knocks the planet into well, basically one planet hits the other hits the other until it hits the ice planet that's headed their way, the rogue planet, and basically it ends up in orbit around one of the suns. But as they're celebrating, I think the planet actually does hit them, and so they end up. They
hit the ionosphere. I think that's what it said. It wasn't the planet. They hit the ionosphere.
Yeah,
and basically, or the slipstream of it. Yes, which, considering it had a breathable atmosphere, even though it's been in deep space, I found weird. But considering what we find out about it, I found it even weirder. But in effect, this part of the story actually follows quite closely with Marooned.
Yes,
very closely with it. Apart from the bits with the toy soldiers and the guitar, burning it for wood, the rest of it does. And there's one part that really annoyed me, but it actually really annoyed me in Marooned as well. We'll get to that when we get to the feeding later on, because it is a food-related niggle.
Okay.
Right, because so basically what happens is they crash onto the planet and they go about trying to dig it out. And that's where you realise it's the Maroon, because they try and go out and it comes, it's full of snow, and he comes back in, basically saying they just can't dig it out, and that's where they have to wait to be picked up. That's where you get the Mayday, Ascension Sunday, third Tuesday after Pentecost, all that aspects of it. So it followed Maroon quite closely.
Yeah.
Because obviously the two of those could work either visually or on the written page, because it was fairly easy to visualize.
It was neat the way they were connected, wasn't it?
Yes.
The way that one led to the other, yeah.
Yes, it was. It actually worked a lot better because you could understand where they were coming from. Whereas in Marooned, they were just out and then they crashed.
Yeah.
Basically, there was no, even if it was the one after the White Hole episode, there was still nothing to say these two were related, because it's typical episodic. You could have put them out of any order, it wouldn't have made any difference. But yes, I actually liked it, the fact that it had a reason to happen.
Yeah.
I think the only difference was the time dilation. That did happen in one episode with a time dilation option, but it wasn't marooned, obviously.
Time dilation. What do you mean?
The bit where they had the time dilation when they were talking to the ship.
Oh, that was probably That's probably Whitehall.
I don't know if it was. It was the one. Remember, they basically see them stepping across the corridor.
That was Whitehall.
Was that still Whitehall? Was it?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, Maroon is right in the middle of that episode with the Whitehall. So there's either side of it.
Well, no. The thing is, what happens in basically, first of all, Rimmer starts slowing down because he's being drawn back to Red Dwarf. That basically his battery's fading, and that's what's dragging him back to Red Dwarf. And that's when he realizes that the Red Dwarf has fallen into the event horizon of something that's affecting time, because it's affecting the entire ship. He's trying to. Yeah. He goes on to come to talk to Crichton, and basically he has to speak quickly just to be deciphered, just be audible to Crichton, and also Crichton basically says the date here is Tuesday afternoon, so but it's Monday here, and basically he says, "Oh, I'm on my way. I'll be back. I'll be there in 15 minutes." And he arrives and the cat goes, "You've been several days."
But that's what I'm saying. So basically, Marooned is right in the middle of the Whitehall episode. Basically, either side of it, because the first part with the potting of the planets, the second part was the time dilation. Whereas, obviously, in Whitehall, on the you had the time dilation and then the potting of the planets.
Right. Okay. Whitehall streamlined it all. That it was all basically the effect of a white hole. Basically, it was all basically in that they fall under the white hole's influence while the engines are dead, and they have to do the pull shot with planets to deflect the white hole, to plug the white hole.
Yes.
Yeah. Now it was written. Now the thing is, white hole is lifted from this, but in white hole they basically ended with, because the white hole is defeated, is vanquished. Basically everything resets, so they all end up back on the ship, and it's before Holly was repaired and all that. So basically, it's consequence free. In the book, it's not consequence free. In the book, they basically Holly kind of remains in this state. They have to. So basically, in Whitehall. If they had been for the reset, Whitehall would have been a game changer. In the book, it is a game changer.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. In the book, where you've got the part with the planet and the pot,
yeah,
and you've got the time dilation after the Marooned episode, as it were. That's what I'm saying. Whereas they had that all as just two separate episodes, the white hole and the time dilation in one, instead of the planet and the time dilation, which were two separate parts of the same story, with the Marooned in the middle, whereas the Marooned is completely taken out as a completely separate story.
Yeah.
So, and obviously the way the Maroon ended, it was obviously they got picked up by the two of them were still there, so they didn't. Rimmer didn't get drawn back to the ship.
No, yeah, that's right. But in the book, he does.
The book he does, but both parts of the book, where the book and the TV show, when they're talking about the food list, things they had, the pot noodle and the dog food, and it says, "We know what we're eating last. I can't stand pot noodle." Do you know what I thought? It's the same in the book and the same in the TV show. The one thing I thought was, where did they get the dog food? Why did they have dog food? Pets are not allowed on Jupiter Mining Corps ship, so why would they have had dog food on it? Because they're basically, that's the whole thing about Frankenstein. They weren't allowed pets or animals in case, but dog food on. So why would dog food be on Starbug? Never mind on the ship at all.
The only thing I'm thinking is maybe someone on the crew knew someone on one of the colony worlds, and maybe they had a dog on station, a bit like in The Thing. There was the dogs on the Arctic base. Maybe brought some dog food for them or something. Maybe picked them up on Mimas, and they were gonna the shopping district on Mimas, and they were gonna deliver it to a dog they knew from the.
It could be just seem weird because that means it's been sitting in the hold for 3 million years, not in the a status booth or anything.
No.
Just actually sitting on a shelf in Starbucks for 3 million years. Do you see what I mean? It just didn't make sense why that tin turned up. The other food, like even the pot noodle, could have been taken out of stasis, maybe the cat, and just think, oop, don't want that. I mean, and just left it. I can understand why bits and pieces of food turned up places because it's food. If somebody's got a bit of food and find it and go, oh, no, it doesn't look good, just put it down. Crichton's tidied it away, maybe put it in a shelf. But the dog food at all, never understood where that came from, but considering the way they went on about animals on the ship. It just seemed to be out of place, shall we say.
Yeah.
I can understand why it was there for the joke of the pot noodle. Or I can understand why dogs lick their testicles. I can understand why it was there for the joke. The jokes are hilarious, especially the testicles after eating dog food and saying, I understand why dogs lick the testicles to get rid of the taste of dog food.
Yeah.
Which I could appreciate, but I just found it incongruous why they had the dog food. Weird. But let's just be picky again. And I know I get picky about stupid things. I'm okay with that, but I know I can be.
Yeah. So basically, while that's going on, they find on Red. Well, basically, there's two diamonds are happening at once. One is the wild lizards on the planet because it was an ice world that's now basically orbiting a sun. It's the planet is starting to thaw while Lister is still on it. So basically, Starbug is basically caught up in this kind of it's almost sinking into the thawing ice.
Yeah.
And at the same time, Rimmer discovers that what's actually happened is the Red Dwarf has fallen into the event horizon of a black hole.
Yep.
And they've tried all the engines to try to escape it, and it's like there's no escaping this. So basically, and that's why there's a time dilation on the ship. And he asks Holly for advice, but the problem is because all of Holly's different components are on separate parts of the ship, Holly comes up as this garbled mess of a form, and he basically can't even form coherent words anymore because basically his data processing it's Tuesday for his data processing, it's Thursday for his image or whatever. Ooh.
What was the ooh?
No, I just heard a bit of a static. That's all.
Right. Sorry, what's happened? Half the 2 seconds I thought it gone. But yeah, the fact that they couldn't communicate with Holly was because all of his processors were throughout the ship, even though they said they brought them all together to do the IQ.
No, but that was before they fell into the event horizon of the black hole.
Yeah, yes, but they brought all his processors together to wire them all up to increase his IQ. So
but that worked because the Red Dwarf was still in normal time at that point. So basically, every part of the
But they basically said they have brought them all to the one location to wire them all up. But now he's basically got IQ and he switched himself off. But when they switch him on, the talkie toaster says it's because his processors are throughout the ship in all different time zones.
Well, I don't know if they necessarily brought all the processors together, but they found a way to channel them all together. Maybe they found
No, I think they said they actually, because it took the scutters. Was it 3 weeks?
Just a minute.
I'm sure they said they brought all the scutters took something like 3 weeks to bring all the processors together so they could wire them all up.
Just a minute.
because it's obviously it was something I thought about where when they're saying about the processors are all over the ship and they're in different time zones, I thought, but they said they brought them all together to do the cross wiring.
Oh.
See, that's the handy thing of physical media. You can flick through the book, whereas the audio book, I would literally have to go back, zip, fast forward, rewind, and I can't pick where it could be by flicking through the book. That's why I need to actually dig out the books and have them sit in front of me, but typical.
It says, it taken almost 3 weeks for the Scudder to channel all the spare runtime from Holly's thousands upon thousands of terminal stacks into the small single central processing unit, which controlled its highest levels of thought.
See, I thought that so if he's basically have just wired it all up to the one processing unit.
Well, I mean,
I've actually took that as I've obviously misread that or misheard that, whereas I thought they brought all the processors to the same location to wire them all up.
See, I don't think they could do that because they'd be kind of embedded, wouldn't they, where they are?
Well, I thought that's why it took a while for the Scutters to do one at a time, bring them all, rebuild it. So basically taking what it'd be like to me, like server farms. You bring out one server farm, move it, put it in a new place, wire it all back up, and then do it that way. That's the way I had to take it the 3 months for all the Scutters to do that. But it's obviously just been a misremembering of it. But that's why I'm saying I thought because of that, then they put all of them together so they could literally cross them all to bring it all together as one, because obviously try to actually wire it all down so each of them are going to be linked into the other one would have just been too long for all the cabling to be done. But it's just the way I've obviously misunderstood it.
Maybe.
And that's why when they said about that, I thought, well, wait a minute. If that's what they've done, how could it be all in different time zones? But that makes a lot more sense if they've not put them in different locations.
Yeah. So basically, their only hope is is the toaster.
Yes, because who has been listening and reading. One hell of a smart toaster.
No. It's Holly told him. Holly basically, whilst Holly was super intelligent, he basically told him all this about physics and how to escape a black hole, all this, and the toaster remembered. So the toaster basically said, "I know how to escape this black hole, but
you need to eat a lot of toast before I tell you."
Yeah, I'd forgotten that bit because I knew basically that it was the toaster that knew about that basically told them how to escape the black hole.
Aye, because it was not 34 slices of toast later.
Yeah. I just thought that's brilliant though. That's just It's like kind of using that character well in that scenario to just put them through hell. It's like, okay, I can force you to eat, to appreciate my toast now.
Yeah, even though the cat didn't and told them that.
Yeah.
But yeah. The fact that it was the toaster that actually got them through it, he told them two things, and one of them they didn't believe him, and he says, "Well, I got you through the black hole."
Yeah.
And basically, so why you actually doubt me now?
Mm-hmm.
But it's the fact that Talkie Toaster, yes, got them through the black hole, but
well, how does he get them through the black hole? We should probably talk about that.
Yes,
because that was actually, that's something they could probably not do on TV.
I don't think they could, because in effect, apart from all the effects, which even writing some of the effects just sounded just too psychedelic out there.
Yeah,
having a quantum mass of infinity and a quantum mass of zero at the same time. It's just a case of weird.
Okay, basically the plan to escape the red black hole is not to actually, it's to actually accelerate into it, and
because the only thing it can escape it is things traveling faster than light, because light being the a universal constant, and even light can't escape a black hole. Anything traveling faster than light should be able to.
It's basically the idea is that if the black hole sucks you, basically using the black hole's gravitational pull to pull you through and out.
So you're basically getting pulled through as you accelerate. So if you hit light speed plus 10 miles per hour, you should get through because you're going faster than light. Doesn't matter how much faster than light, as long as you're going that wee bit faster than light, you should be able to get pulled through.
Yeah. So what happens when they go through is they go through this condition called spaghettification.
Yes.
It's basically the entire crew turn to spaghetti and they start to merge.
Yes, because that's to having the quantum mass of 0 and the quantum mass of infinity at the same time.
While they're in there, they actually see this kind of these gigantic tubes. There's almost like they're kind of like holes basically in reality.
Holly had postulated where the gateways to alternate dimensions, 6 of them. Do you know what I would have preferred?
What?
If they had a slightly higher number and been more like the Norse Tree of Life, because that's 9, isn't it?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Nuremheim and stuff like that. So I would have preferred if they'd actually gone down that route, because there you go, because the Norse one has the Tree of Life, which has got 9 intersecting points. Just a wee bit picky. It makes 0 difference because it's all it's speculative, but because the Norse mythology has all these different interdimensions, and there's 9 of them, and the Earth galaxy is one of the 9.
Right.
I thought it would have been nicer just to have a wee, because there is a few religious beliefs or such like, and I think 9 is the number that a lot of them have in common.
Okay.
But that's just being picky again. It makes 0 difference at all to the story. I just thought it would have been a nicer wee thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, by a streak of luck and chance, they make it out. And,
yes.
Meanwhile, what's happening with Lister?
Well, yes, Lister is trying to survive on the frozen planet with acid coming through, the acid rain coming through the ship's hull. So eventually he has to get out. So he manages to get into a suit, manages to get into something, and gets out and finds himself a small cave.
It's like this was quite kind of tense, wasn't it? Because it was like this was really corrosive acid, and he tried to build this. He basically tried to. He didn't have long to escape because even Starbuck's hull wasn't sufficient protection. So he had to go down to the diesel decks, and he had to make this this lead suit for himself, which offered protection, but he couldn't move an inch in it because it was that heavy.
Yeah.
So it was really tense stuff, and it was like because there comes a point, you see, where he wonders if this planet is persecuting him deliberately.
Yeah.
Which is quite chilling.
Yeah. And he manages to get out eventually.
Yeah.
And he finds a cave that he can shelter in.
Yeah.
And it is the bug turns up the next day, doesn't it? When he wakes up.
No, he abandons the bug basically.
No, not the bug. The bug.
No, okay, that's after. Basically,
yeah. It basically so he stays in there and he watches out for the syrup rain.
It's oil basically.
Oil. I thought it was syrup.
No, it's oil.
It's black rain anyway, but I just thought it was just because they made the description. But the rain and
So, shall we basically explain?
yes,
Right. It turns out this is Earth. And Lister figures this out once he realizes that basically the cave he hid in was one of the nostrils on Mount Rushmore.
yep,
Basically the backstory is that Earth was in. There came a point where humanity had colonized the entire solar system, and they needed a garbage dump because they couldn't
yes,
afford to just shoot all the garbage into space. So they had this horrible idea of, well, let's turn one of the planets into a garbage dump. And because Earth was not what it used to be, Earth got voted the one.
yes, and they used a Eurovision style contest to do it. So Earth kept getting Nalpois, which, considering that, which was silly as well, is another wee niggle. Right, you've got them saying they're from, so you've got the Mars, or they're from Earth, or from Pluto, they're from Mimas, What did they say about the person who was the beloved commentator?
Huh?
The beloved French actress. So why would they be using French if they're talking about all the people who they're voting for their birthplace or wherever they're staying? So they class themselves as Martians, or the Mercury class themselves as Mars and stuff like that.
It says here the show was broadcast from the French settlement of Dion, the Saturnian satellite, which I guess means it was settled first by the French.
Aye. It's just the wording of it. It's basically just, and I thought, why they have installed? They're still using like me when they're actually all over the place. I know.
Well, no. It's actually that's a bit more plausible because the more scattered they are throughout the solar system, the more they're going to have their own cultures. So the more there's going to be different languages. There's going to be more kind of. It's going to be a lot more. If you know what I mean. It's just a minute.
But in effect, Earth has colonized the whole solar system, Pluto as well. Because believe it or not, at this point in time, Pluto's still a planet.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So basically, the vote was. Let's see. It became a straight battle because every other planet has kind of got a winning vote, and they said it was straight battle between Earth and Pluto. The Plutonian delegation made a rather weak case, drawing attention to the planet's erratic orbit and its positive position on the edge of the solar system. And
and then Earth lost. In effect, Earth lost, became the dumping ground, and they would actually have different locations for different things. Like Australia was domestic waste.
Yeah.
Japan was all car parts. Taiwan was all electronics. The North America was glass. So you had, on the East Coast, you had clear glass. The West Coast, you had brown glass. And in the middle, you had green glass. Or was it the other way around? But in effect, it was basically like that. So different countries had different things dumped on them. And one of the drivers, or one of the pilots who would dump the stuff, who was a waste disposal courier, was using, in Europe, which was all the
sewage.
Yes, he was actually writing his name in sewage over a part of Europe. So his name was Wu, and it was Wu was ear.
Yeah, he was.
Aye. And as he was doing his last part, caused a nuclear explosion. It caused the methane gas to ignite.
Right. What happened was basically they got hit by a methane wind, and the ship basically turned on its trajectory, and it hit the sewage, and basically exploded the methane. And because there were still power stations beneath all that, basically all those power stations went up as well.
Yes, which caused it to zoom out of the solar system. And
a bit like Space 1999.
Yes, that's exactly what I was like. I thought at the time, but it went zooming out of the solar system, and as soon as it left its orbit of the sun, it froze over. Hence the reason why they were going to hit an ice planet, and then in the morning, which considering it was actually must be really hot sun, considering the next day things are starting to defrost.
Do you remember when you did the Red Dwarf 4 stream when you were discussing White Hole?
Yes.
I was a bit cheeky in the comments and I said, by the way, trivial point, in the book, one of the planets is meant to be Earth.
Yes. Yes, this is it. So the Earth planet is the blue planet. It was actually hurtling towards the Red Dwarf, which was an ice planet, which turned out to be Earth, which is now the next day is actually defrosting. So that's the part I found a wee bit silly. It was defrosting so quickly the next day because it's got a sun in the sky. It's not just a wee bit, it's actually defrosting quite extensively. And under all that ice, considering it had been traveling through the galaxy, why did it A, retain its atmosphere, and B, retain any life? Suppose under all the garbage and the ice, there was probably still enough heat. But guess what survived? Cockroaches. And they, over 3 million years, they are a bit more civilized, shall we say? And a hell of a lot larger.
Well, before we get to that, there's a point where Lister is basically being battered by the oil rain, and he starts to wonder if the planet is sentient and is actually punishing him for what mankind did to it. Because in a way, you wonder, well, because I was reading that and I thought back to the bit where John-Jules' ship crashes, and I wondered, was that by the planet as well? Because it's kind of left ambiguous, because it could just be that the basically because the planet's so polluted, it's just causing environmental haywire. So basically, it is raining acid rain because the planet's been bombarded with toxins. That's what.
Yeah,
that's just the weather system.
That's what people say. Mother Nature's seeking her revenge.
Yeah, because it is quite like I got chills reading it when Lister's kind of saying, okay, if you're going to kill me, and then he says, look, I can make amends. And it's never quite clear whether the planet was real, whether the planet really was alive, or whether it was just the passing freak of weather.
Yeah, I think it's just one of those things. I must admit, I know he was talking about that, but I must admit, I never actually thought too much about that. Because to me, it's the type of thing you would say. You just constantly feel as if the one thing after the other just seems to be out to get you. You think somebody's out to get you, or something's out to get you. It's just throwing it all, and then you obviously get the bug turning up, and he goes.
I think the writers were kind of leaning towards implying that the planet was alive and it was punishing.
Yeah, I think so, because as the bug comes in, the cockroach comes in, and he tries to kill it by flipping upside down and about to kill it, and then he goes, no, I'm changed, I'm a new thing, and then he throws the blade away and writes it back up.
Yeah.
He says, I'm a new species now, and then things seem to turn for him.
Yeah. Well, it turns for him when he makes the promise to the planet. He basically he thinks he's going to die, so he basically says, look, I'll make amends if you let me live. Yeah. And that's when it starts raining proper drinkable water. And so I think that's kind of meant to be the turning point. The planet has mercy on him and it gives him another chance.
Yeah. But the wee things I found weird about that was the planet being Earth is not... Yeah, that doesn't bother me. But the planet considering it was an ice ball traveling through deep space, still had plants growing in it, olives, and having life still on it. The cockroaches, even if they're saying under all the ice and the garbage, it was still warm enough. But why would the olives be so close to the surface? You see what I mean? Things like that just didn't make sense. and then obviously it thawing so quickly. The next day it started thawing to the point where he could actually see things quite clearly.
I didn't
Like
have
you could see like Mount Rushmore, you could see it was all the glass and stuff like that.
I didn't have too much of a problem with that bit. I mean, it was just kind of the effect of the sun. I mean, and I think it was implied that List had kind of slept for quite a time. It's possibly been sleeping for days before it started to have that effect. That's how I interpreted it.
Yeah, it's not a major issue because they obviously needed to do that. Just otherwise, how would they know it would be Earth and the cockroaches turning up and stuff like that? It had to be done quickly. But
just a minute. I'm going to check something.
Because I'm sure he said it was a couple of days since he had something to eat when he was eating the olive.
Just a minute. No, not that. It's, first meal in 4 days. So there was 4 days after. But like, that's 4 days after they've been around the sun. So plants been exposed to the sun's rays for that long.
Yes, I know, but you still think about it. It's if the ice is the amount of ice on the ball and it's defrosting so quickly. You see what I mean? It's just, it doesn't make sense in that respect, but it had to be done that way or else they couldn't let Lister survive on it because he couldn't have survived on it if it was a ball of ice.
Well, it's a question of how close the planet is over to the sun, doesn't it, I suppose?
Because if it's close enough that it thaws that quickly, then it would be too warm once the ice had gone, which, yes, with the time dilation, he's there for a wee while, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
And all the ice seems to have gone, but there's no major floods. So where did all the ice water go? Do you see what I mean? It's things like that. It doesn't make sense, but it needed to happen. They couldn't let it go slow, or he wouldn't have had any food because the cockroach, he needed the olives. So they had to have the olives there or some food there. Then they had to have the cockroaches turn up. They had to have the rubbish piles still being there that the cockroaches could get access to. So, hold on a sec. There had to be stuff that the cockroaches had to have access to. Do you know what I mean? So they had to do it all quickly. I'm not denying that, but it just 3 million years, and it's like the cats and the 3 million years in the hold. How did they survive? Yeah. Yes, in the book, it basically explains it about they find all the food and the wood and everything and stuff like that, and they don't build ships. They actually just commandeer the ships that are already on Red Dwarf. But you're still talking about 3 million years of all those cats, and even if there's 20 miles of tins of food and stasis pods, it's still a hell of a lot of millions of years worth of food wise. Do you see what I mean? It just things like that.
Well, the thing is, I remember we did actually talking to someone about this once, and they said that if the planet did get ripped out of its orbit, then the only basically the energy source on it would be geothermal. And it's like that's how fish survive at the bottom of the ocean is by there's geothermal vents that provide it with nourishment, and that would probably still function even if the planet gets away from the sun. But obviously, then the problem is the oceans would freeze, wouldn't they? So
yes, they would freeze over the top. But then again, they're talking about, you look at is it Europa or Io? Io's an ice moon, but they reckon that at the core of that, under the ice, there is liquid water.
Yeah.
So there still has to be some heat.
Okay.
So I can understand that. That's why I'm saying under all the ice, you've got the rubbish, and there's maybe it's keeping a layer of warmth that thing could survive. But 3 million years of that, it's just one of those things. If you think about it, it doesn't make a lot of sense. With nothing, because they're still talking about the rubbish is still there, that Lister has to share a bit of rotted sofa just to be accepted by the cockroaches. But so 3 million years and it's still there. Do you see what I mean? That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
It's wee things like that don't make a lot of sense. Yes, if it's 3 million years of it being frozen and it's defrosted, that's a bit different. But if it was, then they couldn't have survived and stuff like that. That's what I'm saying. It's just, if you think about it, things don't make sense. But it's Red Dwarf. You don't want to think about it and making sense.
So eventually Rimmer does come to rescue Lister, doesn't he?
Yes. And due to the time dilation, it is 34 years.
Yeah, 34 years.
34 years. So Lister is 2 years off of being 70.
No, he's 9 years off of being 70.
Is it 9?
Yeah.
30.
That's the thing. He basically he's 61 and he thinks in 9 years I'm going to be 70. I'm nearly 70.
Because 34 years, and I thought he was 24, that would have been 58. So obviously he's 27 because he was in Better Than Life for 3 years. That's what it was. He's 27. So 31. Yeah. Oh, yeah. 61. Aye. It's just obviously I did the miscounting bits and pieces because I remembered he was 24 and 34 would have been 58, not 68. And because basically he was 3 years older when he came out of Better Than Life, which means he was 27, plus the thing is 61. So I've got the 60 from one calculation and the 8 from the other calculation. Yeah. I put the two calculations together in the wrong order. But yeah. So yes, 9 years away from being 70. He thinks he was an old man. And 2 years, you'll be here back shortly. 34 years I've been sitting here waiting for you. And he could speak cockroach clicks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which, the bits and pieces, I still wanted to know how he managed to build the bits and pieces because they didn't mention it. They mentioned the fireplace. They mentioned bits and pieces, but they didn't mention how he got them, which I thought they could have got a wee bit more detail. Because they talked about his furniture. They talked about his roof for his cottage, the walls, the windows, everything. But they said it looked like a hand carved and it looked sort of out of place. And then they never mentioned it again. Yeah, I mean, they mentioned the frame that he had the picture of Kachansky in.
Yeah.
Yes, the frame could have just been a bit of rubbish he's got together and just cleaned up. But the fireplace, they made a point of saying it sort of looked out of place. But they never mentioned it again. Wee silly things like that I wish they had expanded on.
Maybe. I think maybe it just meant that it wasn't made of rubbish, so it looked out of place, maybe.
It could have been that, but I just think they mentioned something and then they didn't actually go into it. It just seemed, why mention it if you're not going to explain it? Whereas mentioning it deliberately and then going, and that's it. And it's almost, it's just wee silly things like that. You go, why'd you do that? In the TV show, you would have had, that looks weird. Did you make that? Yeah. Or the cockroaches made it for me. And it was been a wee offhand thing, but they would have said something. Whereas in the book, there wasn't even any question. They just mentioned it, how it looked out of place. And that was it. There wasn't a case of, did you make this because it looks different? No, I found it was just a bit of rubbish. I just cleaned it up. That type of thing's nothing at all. It just seemed to be, they mentioned it and then left it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's a bit picky with things like that, but that's a good thing about this. We basically can find the good parts, the bad parts, and still make the bad parts still good parts because it's still humorous.
Yeah. So this leads to a bit of a dilemma, doesn't it? Because they basically they split up into two different search parties, and they both end
Find
up
him.
finding him, which is odd.
Yes. Which I had forgot about until I had reread this part about him finding two. I remember him finding the old one and what happens to him, but I forgot about finding the two. I must admit, it was only when I re-listened to it again I remembered.
Yeah.
So when I was getting into it, there was bits and pieces I sort of remembered. And I could remember the gist of the stories because obviously I'd seen the TV show. I knew where parts were going. However, I'd completely forgot about finding the two bodies or the two listers alive.
Yeah.
And that was the thing. So one of them was after 34 years, the cat and Rimmer find him.
Yeah.
However, Crichton finds the other one.
Crichton and the Toaster, because the Crichton and the Toaster have teamed up.
Yes. Have teamed up and they find the other one.
It was the same age he was when he left. When they left.
And a wee bit pasty.
Yeah.
Do you know what? The part of the book I need to actually listen to it again is they said Lister has right. The other one is a polymorph. Right.
Yeah.
Lister explains it's a polymorph, saying they had come across them and they lost half of the clan, the spider, the cockroaches, before they realised and sent it on its way. But where does it come from, or where did they come from?
Well, it explains basically. There's a huge backstory that basically, right? There was this whole industry of
the Guelphs and stuff like that. I remember with the football player and the football teams and the American football was it Interceptors or something like that, the ones with the big arms.
Yeah. And then this became a huger industry of basically genetically engineered furniture that was attuned to your needs and moods. And then there was a rebellion because there was as we were saying before, there's this backstory where one of the someone's furniture,
genetically engineered Guelph sofa,
basically was having an affair with his wife, and he came home and basically the husband came home, found him doing the business with his wife, and shot the furniture dead. But he didn't go to trial for it because Guelphs weren't considered human life. Weren't considered to have any rights, and that was the sparking of. First of all, there was kind of militia groups, and then there was war because basically the guy got off scot-free.
Yeah. What I liked about when they were talking about that, they were talking about how Scotland's football team qualified. Basically, their World Cup squad had a genetically engineered goalkeeper who was the same size as the goal, but they still didn't fail to qualify. And I thought, that sounds Scotland. I laughed at that part just for the simple fact is, they're having a dig at Scotland again because they never qualify.
Well, the good thing about this bit is that it's funny, but it's funny in a way that really kind of gets across the injustice at the same time.
Yes,
because you are thinking like this absurd idea of a genetically engineered BMW and a vacuum cleaner holding a bank hostage to demand justice, and then the idea of the guy wanted for murdering his armchair, and it's like it's funny, but it's also kind of you think that is an injustice because this is life form being considered less than human. It's like, and the whole thing of the jury deciding, well, the fact that he's got this reputation as a guy who's cuckolded by his furniture should be punishment enough.
Yes. Because he'll always be known as the man who was cuckolded by his sofa. So that was his punishment, which it was. But as you said, I suppose it was the typical, it was a political question put in. They didn't actually tell you one way or the other. They're just shown that a life form what do you class as unimportant than yourself? Like if somebody actually kills a dog because it's a dog, do they get charged with it because it's still a life form? So you can't actually just allow people to go around killing whatever they want just because. Yeah. But there is aspects like that I could understand. And where do you draw the line? Where do you class something has got the intelligence? If they're saying, aye, but it's just a dumb animal, then at what point do you class intelligence not to be dumb? Yeah. And if you class a dolphin as, well, they say basically the dolphin is the second most intelligent being next to man. I always say, well, I knew something would beat women into third place, but that's a different story. But you know what I mean? So if the dolphins are the next most intelligent, so if somebody kills a dolphin for no reason or for any reason, would it be classed as murder or just animal cruelty? So if they're the next most intelligent and it's classed as animal cruelty, it doesn't class as murder because they don't class as intelligent enough, or where what would you ever class it as equal? But it's one of those things. But they didn't actually hit you over the head with it. It's a typical thing that people used to say, aye, so-and-so was woke because they used to have politics or messages in it. Aye, the messages was there to actually let you see the injustice, not to actually hit you over the head with it. So you could either just ignore it or say, well, wait a minute, that's quite deep.
Well, it was well done because it was sharp, because it was funny, but at the same time it was kind of tragic at the same time. It was like so basically that's what causes the war between the Gelfs and the humans, and then the solution ends up that basically the humans dump all the Gelfs on Garbage World on Earth, which becomes Garbage World, and it's over the 3 million years. The surviving Gelfs evolve, mutate. It becomes basically Darwinism. And basically, by the end, the polymorphs are what emerges from that. They're the ultimate survivor of the conditions on the ice planet. Or on Earth, now that it's an ice planet.
Yeah. See, I've obviously missed wee bits and pieces because I've obviously been working while I was listening. So there's wee bits and pieces like that. I remember they were talking about the Gelfs and the thing. I've obviously picked up wee bits and pieces I've missed out wee bits and pieces. That's what happens when you're actually you're not concentrating enough. Because as I said, when I'm watching something, I could put it on without concentrating too much because the visual and the audio. Whereas a book, you have to sit and read it. But an audible book, although it's on in the background, you still have to concentrate on it, or else it's just noise in the background. And there's times when I've been working and I've just missed wee bits out. I know I missed a lot of the end. I know I did that because literally with not being feeling great and I had a lot of work over the last couple of days, there's bits and pieces I've missed, and I know the end of it because I'm halfway through. Well, I think I was the last chapter. So I never got to I never got to a second time round the last chapter. So
well,
the thing is,
the thing is, like, I does feel like Lister's kind of gotten wiser from his time, his 34 years, because he knows that polymorph's a threat and he knows to take no chances with it.
Yes.
So what they do is they send a coded electronic message to Crichton warning him about the polymorph, but the problem is the toaster decides to read the message out loud.
Yes.
Just to show off, just as I can read machine language, I can read this, but why have you stopped? Can't you read the rest of it? I was like, I can. This is what it says, and so it becomes a battle to the death with the toaster, and basically, so what happens is basically the toaster saves the day, doesn't he?
Yes, but there is aspects of it I didn't like the polymorph turning into light.
Right, that's after, because that's when basically they slay the polymorph. Basically,
they slay the polymorph. Yes,
but it's already birthed a little
Yes, a small one,
yeah.
a newborn polymorph. But
And
the
so
polymorph
basically,
became light, and that to me was ridiculous.
right. Just to explain, when they get back to the ship, basically they decide, okay, well the polymorph's dead, but Lister says, I don't want to take any chances. Shoot Blue Midget off to space, self-destruct it. Just so that it doesn't have a chance to. The remains of the polymorph don't have a chance to regrow or anything. But
Yes,
that's when the baby newborn polymorph, it's the only way it can escape is basically it turns itself into light, so that that's the only way it can escape through the window. Yeah,
yeah, which I thought was overly silly.
yeah,
Only for the simple fact is light as a medium doesn't work, I think, like that, because you're turning yourself from something physical to something transient. So basically light can pass through a window.
Yeah.
So then why would anything so basically you can't kill light. So if they're about to kill it, why doesn't it just turn into light? You see what I mean? If the fact that they've done it once, it means that anytime they're trying to hide or they're trying to catch a polymorph, it just needs to turn into light and it's gone.
Yeah.
The fact that it turned into water, it was a wee bit silly, but it turned into a gas. I thought, nah, that doesn't work. But as soon as it turned into light, I thought, in effect, I preferred the polymorph from the TV show. The polymorph from the episode or from the book, as soon as they turned it to light, then in effect they're saying is nothing can kill it. Because all it needs to do is turn to light. So they can't chop it in half.
Well, I think it's meant to imply that it takes all its energies to turn itself into a particular form. And basically, once it makes it to Red Dwarf, it can't sustain that form, and so it basically has to revert to a kind of a simpler form to rest and recuperate and recharge its energies. So that's.
It could be, but it's just I thought just the way it actually came across, I thought it's a wee bit weird.
How would you have done it, do you think?
I think what they would have done is basically the fly would have been better if it flown out of the basket and just sort of landed on a collar without being noticed, because it would have been so small. It could turn into a fly. It's because you've seen it turn into from a rabbit to a bouncing ball to a pair of shorts to a giant squid. So the size change wasn't a major issue, but it's the medium change. I didn't like the fact it could turn into a gas or a light, because as soon as it could turn into a light, then there is no limit.
I must say I did like the fact that it was you actually saw from the polymorph's perspective and how the polymorph thought. So it's like you were given empathy with the polymorph doing what nature compels it to do.
I like the idea that it didn't know things unless it actually reached out and got the minds into the minds of its victims. But where did the light come from? Because that wouldn't have been something. I mean, that was just basic forms because it tried to be a fly. But where did these things come from? Initially, it was in itself. So it said something like 6 basic light things it could turn into, and then it somehow turned to light. It was that aspect of it. I thought, oh no, don't do that. It just doesn't work. Could you think about it? How could you kill light? Yeah, I mean, I could understand the changing to different things, because random thoughts, if it's somebody's thoughts, even if they're not thinking about a bouncing ball, they could have been thinking of a bit of holiday and all these things that pop up in the head, because your mind can wander, and it could be anything else you could be thinking about. But just because you're not thinking of that thing in particular, you could be thinking of something that's in the background of your thoughts. Like you would be thinking of a bit of beach and it would pop up a memory, then suddenly everything in that memory in your mind's eye, it can see. So I can understand aspects like that. But it was just the light and the gas that sort of got me, because it just means that why would it actually change? Why would it not just change into light anytime it needed to? So if somebody had caught it and were about to kill it, change the light, they can't hold it. Change the gas, they can't actually kill it, they can't chop its head off, they can't shoot it. It's basically, you see what I mean? It's aspects like that. As soon as they do something like that, they make it too powerful. It's like any TV show. You think about a TV show where they do one thing, and like, what was the Star Wars one where they did the light speed ram?
That was The Last Jedi.
The Last Jedi. But as soon as they did that, then the trench run in the Empire Strikes Back or New Hope basically made zero sense. Why would they send all those ships with all those crews to attack the Death Star when they could have actually just sent something at light speed?
And yeah, I'd agree there.
See, I mean, so introducing that sort of makes all the other things sort of less important, whereas introducing the light in the book just makes all the bits and pieces where, like, for instance, in this one where they're actually hunting for the polymorph, they do the bit with the heat seekers.
Yeah.
Right. So heat seekers make nothing because it can turn into a gas or liquid. So would it be hot?
Well, but the thing about the heat seekers is that basically they fired the heat seekers blindly, and it never
yes.
So it never even hit the polymorph. The polymorph. So, and then when the heat seekers finally do hit the polymorph, it's preoccupied with feeding, so it doesn't even see what's coming.
Yes, but in effect, things like that, because obviously, and you think about it, anything, all it needs to do is keep its wits, and then nothing could ever do it. And so it would have to be only if you catch it in the middle of a feeding. So obviously, that's what I'm saying. It just makes a wee bit silly, because once you start going down that route, then all the things that could kill it mean nothing.
Yeah,
because you have to justify how it kills it rather than it just happened.
Okay, but while it's in its life form, it can't feed. It doesn't have the means to produce a tentacle to do the feeding. It needs to be in a physical form to do the feeding, and it has to feed. That's how it gains its energy. So there's that.
Yes, I can understand it, but that's what I'm saying. See how the fact is you've introduced something, so then you've introduced it, then you have to justify how it can be killed, rather than beforehand. It's just it could die different ways, but you didn't need to say but because it needs to be in this form like that, and that's how it can get killed. Whereas beforehand, before the light came in, you didn't need to actually even think about having to justify that aspect of it. That's what I'm saying about the thing about it. And I did like the idea that the polymorph, a lot of the funnier aspects from the episode were in this, like the cat and the girl.
The cat actually gets a bit more scenes, doesn't he?
It gets a bit more scene, but the fact is the woman who he's trying to show off to appears, same as the episode. He's the drunk, although it was the least favourable of my characters from the cat, from Danny John-Jules, because I preferred the Dwayne Dibley later on. But in this one, it was the first time it happened, and he obviously was the drunk. I don't care. And then you had Crichton being the use jerks and go ahead, I'll feed you to it and stuff like that.
Well, first of all, like, they do make things a bit more visceral when Lister's attacked by the polymorph. Like, it turns into a rat and actually lands on his face, and it spits at his throat. It's all a lot more visceral. It's all like you're physically there. You're feeling what Lister feels. Yes.
Whereas on the TV show, they had the shorts, and then it's the second. My second most feared thing. What is your feared thing? And I think jumps out that. But whereas they did it as a rat in this, whereas they had it as some big monster.
I think with the snake, they couldn't really handle the snake that long on TV. So you didn't quite get the full scare from it. Whereas with this, you do, because they can actually they can write the rat doing all the most horrific things.
Yes,
and yeah, yeah. I must say, it was a bit difficult to imagine old Lister in the same scenarios. Yeah,
yes,
because basically you're imagining the TV story, only Lister's old, but he's still got this kind of, he's still basically tended to this hot-headed, come on then, all you slags, you know.
yes. Well, that was a thing that I would have preferred to have seen, an old Lister like that.
Yeah.
Rather than the young one. But then again, you've obviously got the aspects where they made it a bit sillier with the baseball bat and he swings it and a crunch. Oh, that type of thing. But yeah, I think the older Lister, you still can't picture it, even though you're told he's 61, but you still can't imagine him. You still picture him as the young one from the TV show.
Yeah, I would have liked them to maybe adapt the character more for this, adapt the scenes for the fact it's an older Lister.
Yeah. Because he could have been a bit less terrified because he'd lived with a load of cockroaches, so he'd probably been less afraid of rats because he had all these cockroaches living around him. Whereas that's something initially people think cockroaches and get a wee bit scared of. But when you're living with giant cockroaches, are rats going to freak you out the same way?
Well, I mean, phobia is a phobia, isn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so, but it's just the idea that being older and living with things that are generally scary, they might not be as terrifying as they once were, even though you have a phobia against them. It's like you've got a phobia of heights. I've got a phobia. I had a fear of heights, but I had a house on 18th floor of the high-rise flats in the highest point of Glasgow, one of the highest points of Glasgow. So when I looked out my window, there was nothing round about us. So it was just all down you were looking. Even though I had a fear of it and my windows were closed, I still got used to looking out of it. If the window was open, the fear increased exponentially because I could feel the wind in my head and my face.
No, but the difference is if a rat is kind of a different thing, because you're fearing something that can basically move fast and basically it's something animated, something you can't control, something you can't just look at and get used to. It's basically it'll come out of nowhere.
No, but what I'm saying is, it's the fact is a phobia is a phobia, as you said, but gradually you can work your way around phobias.
Yeah, but there were probably no rats on.
Yes, but what I'm saying is, it's the other thing. You can have a phobia about spiders, right? But if you came across a rat, a big, enormous rat, suddenly a spider standing next to it might not be the most scary thing you see. Do you see it? That's what I mean. It could your surroundings could mean that you're still scared of them, but less terrified as you once used to be. Especially if you've lived in 30 years or 34 years with a load of big scary monsters in effect, and you've come to see them as normal. So that's what I'm saying is things that used to terrify you may still terrify you, but not in the same way. That's what I'm getting at. It's just a case of you can think about things that you get used to after a while that used to terrify you because other things make it less terrifying. But could still be scary. But as I said, like, I used to have a fear of heights, but because I was so high up, and anytime I looked out the window, it was just all down. But I got more used to it. But as soon as the window was open and I could feel air, the fear came back. It's that type of thing because I could feel the wind in the face, and I knew I was high up. So
yeah, but that's
it wasn't the fear of heights I get. Then it was only at certain aspects of it. So. Yeah, but I can still be fear of heights outside, but inside there's things that make it less scary.
Yeah, but that's what happened in the book. Was basically the rat landed on him. Basically the rat went to extremes that gave a new dimension to the fear.
I suppose the fact that it spat in his mouth and things like that. Yes, or dribbled into his mouth. I could see that, but it's just the fact is they went there after they described these cockroaches in some detail. Yeah. Considering how the cat and Rimmer acted when the cockroach landed between them. Mm-hmm. Where Rimmer, Lister, the first time he saw it, was terrified, but very quickly got over it. That's what I'm saying. It's just the aspect of fear in certain circumstances could be less. Yeah, as I said, it could be that, but it's just the fact is how the rat was considered the second most scary thing he'd ever seen, considering how he would lived for 30 odd years.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I think like the short shrinking, I can understand the terror in that. Yeah. That your love spuds get crushed. Yes, I can understand that as a fear for a lot of men. Yeah. But it's just other things that if you're living in a particular way, you would be less fearful of it because of your circumstances. But yes, I can understand the fact it jumped in his face and stuff like that heightens the fear. But then again, if he's got a fear of rats and a spider did that, he would probably freak out just as much and is scared if a spider is right at his face. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. So it's just being a bit picky.
Yeah.
Just a wee bit picky, not a lot, just a wee bit.
Yeah.
But I can understand why the fear it takes out. But yes, I think it would have been nicer to see a bit more age in there. And that's why I'm saying maybe the older Lister wouldn't have had the same type of fears.
Yeah.
But it still could have been things to take out his fear.
Yeah. So basically he gets drained. So he basically becomes the meathead thug that he was in Red Dwarf. And then basically there's the whole hunting for supplies bit, and they're going to abandon ship, basically.
Yes.
But the thing is, it plays a lot more on the paranoia, because basically they find this convenient driving trolley, basically, that looks kind of brand new. And so they start packing on it, and then Rimmer starts to suddenly think, wait a minute, where's that trolley come from? Where's that buggy come from? And they said, don't blow it up, and they blow it up. So it's like basically they spent 2 hours packing the thing together, and they destroyed the thing.
And it turns out it was just a trolley.
Exactly, yeah.
And they were more annoyed at the fact is it took them, was it 20 minutes or whatever, to actually unpack it and pack it again.
Yeah.
That was what annoyed them most. But this is the part where it actually I've only listened to it once, and I was in the middle of other things, so you'll need to actually bear with me in this, because your knowledge will be a hell of a lot more than mine's.
Right.
So I'll let you take the lead.
Right. Basically, same thing happens with the cat, except we kind of basically describes how the cat has to run from the heat-seeking lasers. But basically, again, Rimmer gets the jitters. He says it's over there, and they shoot, and they basically no, because
that's the one from the polymorph. The bit with the polymorph where they shoot into the thing, maybe with the heat seekers.
Right. Yeah. Well, the thing is, in this, it's because Rimmer did a boo-boo by blowing up the buggy. They said, you know what, that wasn't a living thing. So just to be sure, set the bazookas to heat seekers. At that time, this time, if you shoot at something that's inanimate and it's not the polymorph, then it will hopefully seek out the polymorph instead. But they fire it, and they basically, because there's no polymorph around, it seeks out the cat. So the cat
they used the same line. Well, a hologram doesn't give off a heat, and now there's a mechanoid.
Yeah.
And the cat goes on a runner, and they can only outrun it because he's turning, which made a hell of a lot more sense than the TV show, because he could only outrun it because he could turn sharper, and being a cat has got a higher speed.
Yeah.
So the fact that he could turn sharper turns allowed him to outrun it until he goes down the corridor.
Yeah. and then basically it's the same trap. He traps them in this lift,
Yes.
and then he meets Jenny, the genetic mutant,
Aye.
and she basically seduces him to the limit of his vanity and basically sucks out his vanity.
Yes, but even the fact is, hi, I'm the cat. Who are you? I'm genetically. I'm the genetic
Mutant.
mutant. Jenny, who?
Yeah.
I thought it was quite good. It's typical cat, more interested in looks and stuff like that. Even after he's been introduced, he still actually goes, who? But yeah. And then obviously and then Crichton and Lister turn up. Rimmer turn up.
Yeah. And Rimmer basically needles him as it being his fault, and he brings up the fact that Crichton also caused the Nova 5 to crash.
Yeah, and basically how much trouble and how much he's caused.
Yeah.
Because he's been more interested in other stuff. So it basically takes his selfishness. Selflessness away.
But yeah, basically takes his guilt away. Basically the Rimmer who arrives on the scene is actually the polymorph.
Yeah,
and basically that's how it basically triggers the maximum guilt in Crichton and basically sucks him dry of his guilt. So Crichton kind of basically becomes guiltless, and Rimmer arrives on the scene.
Now, and he even actually offers to kill the cat, and the cat's quite happy with it.
Yeah, because the cat's got no self-worth. He basically just he starts drinking, and then Crichton just the journey back is basically a lot more drawn out, with Crichton just shooting at random posters, and then he decides to shoot the cat for a laugh, and basically the bazooka's out of bullets. And so it's like, I'll kill you later. It's like, well, don't put yourself in inconvenience. No point putting yourself out for a useless piece of shit like me.
Yeah.
Which I thought was good. I thought if only they'd kept that had that in the episode, because that would have been given Cat more of a moment. That's kind of like the Cat. But
they did have that the cat being worthless in the episode. Yeah, but he did say that, but he said it at a different time. Because remember in the episode, Crichton's basically stay ahead of me and I'll offer you to the genetic. Maybe it'll let me live. And then the cat's also got that spiel, but they don't have the murder option and stuff like that in it. So that's what I'm saying. So they still have the lines, but they just have them in different places.
The thing is, I thought it was funny because it was Crichton and the cat playing off each other. Guiltless Crichton and like self-loathing cat, basically Crichton just being, I just thought that was the perfect kind of juxtaposition. I thought that made it funnier.
Yeah.
By the way, in this version, Rimmer, basically he gets drained en route because our polymorph actually goes to his hologram simulation suite.
Yes, which I thought was actually a good thing.
Yes, because it basically triggers a lot of his old memories, and it brings to surface his life, the frustration with his parents, and even going back to when he was a baby and he, his pacifier fell out and fell on the floor and no one would pick it up. And like, it just kind of all the anger came together, and his experience at the public school, the private school.
At least it didn't have Lister sleeping with his mother.
No, it was just kind of, it was more, I think they wanted to go a bit more, because it's a book, they could go into the memories of Rimmer. So I think they did it in a way that brought him more to life. And I just thought it was kind of a comical image. You had the polymorph in the hologram suite controlling the computers, just replaying certain favorite, kind of a particular memories. I thought that was kind of almost like a DJ.
Yeah. But I thought it was a better way to give Keisha a chance, Rimmer.
Yeah.
Because I didn't really like the way they did the last one anyway, because yes, in the last book you had Rimmer almost, actually in this book, you had him almost marrying his mother.
Yeah.
So he did, but so you've got that aspect of it, and if they did that with it again, it would have just been a wee bit too many mother
Oh,
jokes.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. I think I liked it better the way they did it in this.
Well, I think they want to kind of make more of a point of the fact that Rim was the hologram, so that his vulnerability is the hologram suite. So that's
Yes.
more plausibly that's where the polymorph would go if it wanted to get him.
Well, apart from anything else, you're correct because it physically couldn't have touched him.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the TV show, they didn't even bother about that. It still could touch him and drain him.
Yeah.
Whereas if it was a hard light later on, yes, that would work. But if he's a soft light, there's no way it could have done it that way.
Unless
so I think it was smarter in that respect.
The only way the polymorph could do it is if it actually turned into another hologram. But yeah, again, that's the same with the light bee thing, isn't it? The light.
Yes, but see that's another thing as well. It would have worked based on that because it's already said it can turn into a light. So in that aspect of it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is crazy for me, I must admit.
So basically the debate is kind of different in that the main difference is of course that the toaster's involved, and I think this is a good point because the toaster is the last, like, as obnoxious as the toaster is, the toaster basically is the last one with his faculties intact, and he can just see that everyone else is completely dysfunctional to the point of being suicidal, like they're just kind of. And for that, Crichton basically trashes the toaster. Basically, just puts the toaster in a blender. And like Rimmer's like, I'm sure there was some non-violent way of resolving your differences with the toaster and all this.
Which is probably a way for Talkie Toast, a good way for Talkie Toaster to go out.
Yeah,
but
the basically when they go out to hunt the polymorph, it's a lot more. It's unlike the TV story. There's a lot more going on. There's kind of it's done as a kind of a. There's more of a lot more happens basically.
Yes,
because they find it. Yeah, because do you want me to cover this or do you remember?
No, I think it's probably a lot better if you actually cover a lot more of this because I'm picking up bits. As I said, I was listening to it while I was doing other bits and pieces, so there's bits I missed, and I can't remember a lot after this part.
Right. Well, they find the polymorph where they did in the TV story. Basically where in the decks where the supplies are, but it's sleeping, and they get into this petty argument about how they're going to take it out. Lister has his plan, and they're basically all trying to outdo each other with how to off the creature, and then that's when the creature escapes, and then it goes on the attack, and that's it. It turns into the form of a lamppost, and that's basically the lamppost is indestructible. They fire the bazookas at it. It does divide. They can't go into hand-to-hand combat with the lamppost, and at some point, let's see, just a minute. The lamp. It maintains the form for 2 hours, then it changes, and that's when Lister makes a charge for it, but he gets flung away, like violently, and basically, it's implied that that's where he dies because basically the shock of the violence basically induces a heart attack.
Yeah.
And now that only becomes clear later.
Because you don't know at this point. All you know is that basically he's been thrown against the.
No. The next chapter actually just says how did he die, and it basically it says one of them died.
No, I'm saying at this point, basically all you know is he's been thrown. It's the same type of thing you've seen in any episode in the past. They've been thrown against something and get up afterwards. I'm saying just at this point, you don't know he's not getting back up.
Yeah. So basically, the rest of them run to the atmospheric suite. It's a small it's basically below deck, so it's like they're as low as they can go. So and then the polymorph collapses in after them, basically just and so it looks like they're done for. It's a lot more tense. It's a lot more like I was reading it, I got really, really involved in it, and then Crichton kind of rushes for the and he basically calls the lift, and it's the lift that saves the day because the lift opens and the balls, heat-seeking balls, fly out and they hit the polymorph, and then as they recover, that's when they find Lister has had a heart attack. Yeah. And it's Rimmer who says, "Is he okay? Is he okay?" Because it's like it just seems like Rimmer seems genuinely concerned that the Lister's not okay because he's not waking up, but Crichton doesn't say anything, and it just says he just closes his eyes, and which just implies Lister's died.
Yep.
And so that leads to the final part of the book.
Because that's what they're talking. They're talking about effectively what our next book's going to be anyway. Because we've got 2 other books after this one, which is Backwards and The Last Human.
Right.
And based on the end of this episode, of this book, I think we'll probably best go on to the one that, Backwards, to me, is the natural successor to it.
Okay.
Which is Backwards, because this one ends.
Right. So we'll talk a bit about how it ends. So basically, they have a funeral for Lister. They basically leave like a chicken, foiled chicken at his feet and a picture of Krachansky, and they fire his coffin into space.
Yeah, they do a Wrath. It was a Ratha Khan. It wasn't a Ratha Khan. Was it a Ratha Khan? It kind of is. Aye.
Right, but so Rimmer kind of goes to tell Holly, and Holly basically processes the data and then forms basically the drive room starts coming alive with data printouts of instructions of what to do.
Yeah, because Holly has gone back to the black hole incident.
Yeah, right. Okay, and it figures out a way that they can bring Lister back. First of all, they have to pursue the coffin and recover the coffin. Because Rimmer is basically animated by this. Once he realizes the way of saving Lister, it's like it restores his joy, which is strange. It's strange, but it doesn't feel that out of character. It just feels like by this point they've become reliant on each other, and Rimmer wants Lister back.
Yeah. See, when I remember reading that, I didn't actually think it was because I thought it was just Rimmer being, well, good, there's no excuse to switch me off if we try, because that means we think about it, there's no need for Rimmer now. Lister's gone. So they don't need him there for the cat. They don't need him there for Crichton. So he's only there because he's actually on. So if they don't need him on, they're not going to switch him off, but they're not going to actually, if anything happens, they're going to actually repair it. So if anything happens to the mechanism and stuff like that, power can go off because we might need that for something else. And it's just they use, it was an excuse. That's how I read it initially. I remember reading it and thinking he's found a reason to actually not get switched off.
Yeah, but my reading was, I thought it was genuinely implying that Rimmer had come to become fond of Lister and was glad at the thought of saving him. Like he didn't want Lister to be dead anymore.
Yeah. See, I think that's the good thing about it, because it can be read 2 ways. Yeah. If you go into Rimmer's character, or his actions, because you know what it's like. His actions can say one thing, mean another anyway, because he's just doing it because that's what's expected of him, or he's doing it because he wants to ingratiate himself. Whereas this one, you can do it. It could be either he is genuinely happy, even though he's never going to admit it, or he's doing it, he's saying the right things, but in his head he's thinking, that means they won't switch me off. There's no excuse to switch me off. Even if we try all this and it doesn't work, it still gives me time. I'm just thinking, because we know the Rimmer character, I suppose I'm reading into his character into it because of that. Whereas if you've not watched the TV show, it's very easy to put either in, because if you get used to the Rimmer character, his personality type sort of shines through. I think that's where I've got that from.
But I think the book was trying to imply that the Rimmer had kind of grown, that he wasn't in a way that he couldn't on TV. That on TV, like he has to be to form as the self-serving guy who doesn't really like Lister that much. But I think they were kind of in this. They could imply that Rimmer had grown and he'd grown fond of Rimmer, or he was fond of Lister. So basically, the other part of the plan is they have to. What's that noise? I can hear. Is that your dog?
It's probably my dog's messing around, and it's almost like a scratching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So basically, after that, they have. So Holly's instructions are pretty elaborate, and so the next thing they have to do is they have to go. They have to retrace Red Dwarf steps. They have to kind of go back to a spot where Red Dwarf has been before to find a huge collection of 1,000 canisters. Now, none of the crew seem to know what these canisters are, but I think it's implicit that the canisters are basically they're the remains of the Red Dwarf crew, the ashes of the Red Dwarf crew that were jettisoned after the accident. No, after Lister realized that he needed to dispose of the crew.
Because that's the bit in the drive room in the TV episode where they're basically saying goodbye to them all.
Yeah. And they find a particular canister and no one knows what's in it apart from Rimmer, but he doesn't say. Now, while this is happening, we actually follow Lister's perspective because suddenly he awakens and he's got this pain in his chest and he's in this hospital.
Yeah.
And he basically gets taken out of the hospital into an ambulance and he gets deposited on the street.
Yeah.
And then he kind of recovers. And then he starts to then he goes to a cafe to recover. And basically, rather than eating the food, he ends up regurgitating the food.
Yeah. Brings it back up.
And then he
goes outside and gets money put in his wallet and handed to him.
At knife point.
At knife point, yes.
And that's when he starts to piece things together and realize that the time's running backwards. And basically, what's happened that day is he got mugged. Then he tried to relax in a cafe. Didn't work. And he had a heart attack later. Then went into hospital and died.
Yeah.
And then he finds basically because his wallet has his home address, now he knows where he has to go home. So he hails down a taxi. And it's in the taxi that he basically finds a newspaper. And the newspaper has an obituary for him.
Yes, because it was the day after.
And basically, but the obituary contains a secret message from the Red Dwarf crew, where they're saying, basically, we've left you here, we buried you here. We passed through the omniverse, through the black hole, to this universe where time runs backwards. And because of that... it meant that basically you could come back to life because with time running backwards, you were dead now you're alive. And this basically you have this whole life on backwards Earth to look forward to. I can hear. Was that music?
Yeah, that's my wife's actually listening to something through in the living room. My mic must be picking it up very, very clearly.
Yeah. Okay. And so because of that, so Lister makes his way home. And basically the message says that we're going to, we couldn't stay because time runs backwards here. We put you here because it would revive you from death and it would restore you to youth over a period of decades.
I think it's another 34 years, isn't it? So he's effectively been left for 68 years, honest Todd.
Kind of,
because it's basically they either want to get him back to his age beforehand, which is the 27, or before Better Than Life, which was 24.
Well, the thing is, the thing is, they have if they just put him here and restored him to life and then took him to Red Dwarf, he'd still be at that age liable to just have a heart attack again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think they thought, well, look, he has, and besides, he needs to kind of build a life here. Like, because I think once they buried him, they knew that there was something kind of significant about the life he had here, or was going to have here. So they knew, okay, well, we have to leave him here till early adulthood because he's got a life to build. We can't stay because we'll de-age. So we'll go back to our universe and we'll pick him up in 36 years.
Yeah, which they can't. We'd have to go into stasis otherwise.
Yeah, and but that which wouldn't work in the backwards universe because stasis, because of the stasis pose, they wouldn't work that way. So basically, so Lister arrives home and he realizes that Holly has made it possible. Basically, it was Kachansky's ashes they found, and by sending her ashes into this universe as well, he's basically meant that Kachansky is alive and is his wife. And so basically, the last scene in the novel is he basically goes into the garden and sees an old Kachansky there, and he recognizes her, and he realizes that they have a life together here.
Yeah, and she smiles at him.
Yeah, and he recognizes the smile.
Yeah.
So that's the end.
Yeah. See, the first time I read it, when it basically comes back and he's Kachansky's there, I thought either two things. One, yes, the pod had to be of Kachansky's, but also that it also was maybe 3 million years ago because of the time frame of things.
Yeah.
But then again, because it's running backwards, where does it trip up and stuff like that? So their 3 million years ago would have actually been what? Cretaceous. It really depends. You see what I mean? How if their time is running backwards, so it's with time running backwards, it's best not to think about it. And remember,
well, no. Wait. It does make sense because if you think about it, if you're meeting a parallel universe where time runs backwards, then their age is not going to be this. Their age of existence isn't going to align with yours. So basically, it could be 3 million years ahead of the 23rd century there. And but you go through into that universe where time has run backwards to the point where it's the 20th century there.
Yes, I suppose it would be that. But what I was thinking was, remember, when they need to go back, make sure they hit the right universe because, in effect, our universe is the only one that's running the wrong way, which is implying that the other 5 are running the correct way, backwards.
Maybe.
Because that's what they said. They basically says, Holly said that our universe, it doesn't make sense because it's running the wrong way. Yeah. And he does mention when he sees the 6, he says, Holly said that ours is the only one running the wrong way. So twice they make the reference to ours running the wrong way. And one of them, they say ours is the only one running the wrong way. Because one of them, he says, it doesn't make sense because it's running the wrong way. And the other time he says, ours is the only universe running the wrong way.
Yeah.
So that means the other 5 universes are running backwards.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. So just make sure when they go through the right universe. And also never find him, or also find a different one of him. Which I must admit, I enjoyed Backwards. I'm looking forward to Backwards.
Well, yeah, well, we're going to review that next time. So we should probably stick to our thoughts on this book so far.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. I'm looking forward to Backwards. So based on the way this one finished, I think it finished better than the way Life Infinity welcomes Careful Drivers, because it was a similar way I think it should have ended, where it should have been the enigmatic smile, but instead of that, the enigmatic smile from Kachansky, whereas maybe he's putting the cream on and it spells out the letters, and then he could have left it there. You see what I mean? It's a way I was thinking, based on the fact is the way they have set up for the next book.
Mm-hmm.
whereas they only had the wee brave part. Whereas I think the Infinity book would have actually been better if they only had the sort of setup to the point where that, and then not them finding a way to get out, then coming back in to go back out again. That's what I was meaning about that aspect of it, where if they finished it a similar way, the way they finished this book, with the enigmatic smile, you know it's backwards, you know something, but you're not entirely sure what.
See, I think like this was for me, this is a perfect ending.
I think so too. Yes.
I mean, I feel like they didn't really need to do a follow-up necessarily. I feel like that was kind of if you were ever going to end Red Dwarf, this was how to do it. Because and in a way it's nice, kind of, in a way it is a sort of bookend to the Better Than Life segment, because obviously they couldn't stay in the Better Than Life because it was killing them, but they had everything they wanted there, and this was kind of an ending where Lister at the end does get everything he wants
and has lived a nice long life with it, and a happy life.
So it's almost like the pleasures of the game, but without it killing him. So it's almost like it's the ending is his Better Than Life ending almost.
Yes, because as I said, it basically gives him a long life with Kachansky.
Yeah.
To the day he died.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Because we're obviously seeing it now and backwards, and that's, I think, works quite well. But the fact is, that's what I'm saying. I think the book ended the way better than the way Infinity ended, because if Infinity ended with the part where you find out they're in Better Than Life, but you don't know a lot about it. All you know is the pain in his arm spelling out Better Than Life. I think would have been a similar way it ended in this book, leaving it in a way that you think, oh, wonder how they're going to actually do that, or what does that mean if you're not entirely sure of the TV show. Whereas this one, if you don't know about backwards and stuff like that, it's the same idea. You're learning about going backwards, but you want to see what happens.
Well, I think it's like the Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers. That was more a cliffhanger than a conclusion. This was a conclusion, and it was for. I think I thought it was a beautiful conclusion.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. It's a conclusion that you can go on from, but if you decide not to, it leaves a puzzle. Whereas in Infinity, it's a setup for the next book, but there is no puzzle. And I would have preferred if it left it with the puzzle. And that's what I'm saying. A similar idea to this one, where he's in backwards. He's an enigmatic smile. You just want to find out, because there's another book. You just want to see how that one turns out, because he's got a long life there. So he's not going to turn up as soon as he comes in and sits down for a coffee, and they turn up and go, right, come on, because he's not, because they want to take him back to his youth. So he's going to have a long time there. So you want to learn about that, and you want to see it. So that's what I'm saying. It was a good setup for the next book. But unlike Infinity, I think they finished it perfectly in this one with the start, with the end of where they did with backwards. Whereas in Infinity, I wish they'd stopped a wee bit earlier and not talked about them trying to get out just to change their mind at the last minute. I would have preferred if they just stopped with the enigmatic, oh, what's happening? I want to see the rest. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things. Infinity's a good book. This one's a good book as well. But I think this one finishes a lot smarter.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by that, because if the Infinity ended the similar way to this, the two of them would be as good. And I think the ending of this book is what is the difference between the two. One's a good book. I would have probably said a good 7.5, 8 out of 10. This one, you're talking about a good 8.5 to 9 out of 10.
Yeah.
I mean, so the two of them are really good, but this one's just slightly better based on the way they finished it.
Well, the thing is, like, Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers was mostly set up, wasn't it? Whereas
yes,
Better Than Life, they could do a lot more with what had been set up.
Yep.
They could do kind of. I mean, some of it was just retreading the ground of the TV show, but it did new things as well.
Yeah, and
Like,
which in the physical media, it expands a lot on it, but it doesn't just give you the wee half-hour episode. It gives you more detailed explanations for it. So,
and I
like that. It connects them a lot more as well. It basically is a it's not an episodic thing. It's basically a cohesive story throughout. Though, so you're talking about White Hole, Marooned, Polymorph, and Backwards. Well, even Better Than Life. So there's 5 episodes that they sort of tie all together in a more conclusive.
They do. I think they do it quite neatly as well.
Yes, it doesn't seem as if they're just finishing one, get into another. This is just all continuation of this story. So the fact that the White Hole thing comes straight out of Better Than Life because they come in and there's nothing working.
Yeah.
It's because it's happened already and they're already in that part with the Hollywood IQ and stuff like that, which are feeding into the next aspect of it. So they're not getting over one and then suddenly they're waking up the next morning, something else happening. They're still suffering from the Better Than Life thing.
It's nicely,
and then they'll get it the next one.
It's nicely fluid, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it flows very well. So, but I must admit, I did like this book. I liked it a lot better on first read. On the reread, because I'm a wee bit more critical of it, and the audio, I think, doesn't do it the same justice. I think physically reading it would have probably made it better. Yeah. So it's the medium has made me drop it down a bit.
All right, fair enough.
So I can't complain about the book because the book's fantastic, but the audiobook, although it's read by Chris Barry and it's an unabridged one, so it's still the whole thing. But because of the way you listen to it, it is a wee bit. I'm finding Audible aren't as good as books because of the way I listen to them, and I'm aware it's my problem. But can't complain.
Fair enough.
So, what would you say about the books? 2 books so far. What would your score be for them?
I think you kind of have to read them together, but I think that together they make a very solid. I'd say 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10.
I think you're right because I know I said 7.5 to 8, and then this one is a 8 to a 9. I think two of them together is a 1. Big book. Yeah, I think it actually increases because it is a story with a good beginning, middle, and end. Because if you take the Better Than Life is the start, and how they got to that point, and then the Better Than Life and even the White Hole is the middle, then I think it does a good beginning, middle, and end across the 2 books. So I would say an 8.5 to a 9 definitely as well. Yeah, but which is ideal. That's what we want. We want good books. We don't want bad books. No. If we have to read bad books, we're doing something wrong. Yeah. But so next week, Backwards.
Yep, by Rob Grant because
Grant. Doug Naylor does The Last Human. Yes. Yeah. And the reason, do you know why the 2 of them did separate books?
There's a bit. Well, I've actually got Last Human to hand, and Doug Naylor does a preface. He says, just a minute. I mean, this is probably the polite version, but
probably.
Right. What he says is, acknowledgements. Thanks to Rob Grant. As many of you will know, the previous 2 Red Dwarf novels were written in collaboration with Rob Grant. In the summer of 1993, Rob expressed a desire to write a Red Dwarf novel on his own. I look forward to reading it and thank him for the sections of this book that are based on the TV script we wrote together. Muchas gracias, Doug Naylor.
Yeah. Well, the way I heard it was, although he wanted to write a book on his own, they had been given a 4-book deal. So the 2 of them had done 2 books, and because he wanted to do one on his own, they basically said, well, we've got the money for 4 books, it's split down the middle. Why not do a book himself?
I can see
So
that's
what I heard. They basically got a 4-book deal, and because he wanted to write one on his own, they effectively turned around and said, "You write one on your own. That way, we don't need to split. Yeah. We don't need to actually say, well, you've done the last 2 books, so you get the money. And wait a minute, why don't I get the money? Because I would that type of thing." So I think that's why they did it. So they wanted to go separate ways, but he wanted to write a book on his own. He thought, well, we'll do one, and that way we're given the 4 books we've signed the contracts for, and it's just that's the way it goes. That's what I heard, and I think it sounds probably a good way of doing it, because if you think about it, if you've been given the money already for the 4 books, and one of them wants to go and write a book himself, then you're not going to say, right, you write the next 2, but we're still splitting the money exactly. So the easiest way is to split it as well.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, the way I read Better Than Life's ending, I thought, well, it almost felt like it was written as though for a 2-book deal, because I feel like 2 books, all you would have needed is 2 books. But I suppose
I think so, and I think they got the 4-book deal.
Yeah,
although they wrote the 2 books as 2 individual books, but they were. I think if the 2 of them were continued to write, I think the backwards would have been the next natural book.
Yeah,
to go on to, and then if they decide to go on further, I don't know if it would have been The Last Human or whatever came off the back of Backwards. How Backwards ends would have been the way to, because the 2 of them would have actually wrote and it would have been a 4-book continuous story from the beginning.
Yeah,
because you think about it, Infinity Welcomes Careful Driver starts right at the beginning.
Yeah,
so they would have continued it on, and you might have actually got an actual conclusive end where he somehow manages to go back in time and meets Kachansky, and that's how it finishes. You don't know, but that's the thing. I think they would have left it very open. It might have been the cat found the cats from the Promised Land. It might have been Rimmer became Ace and flies off to save the world. It might have been that Crichton actually finds something.
I know they were considering doing a book on the cat people, but that never happened though.
But that's what I'm saying. So after with the 4 books, they might have incorporated that within. Yeah. So they basically, especially the last book, there might have been one about the cat people and how the cat ends up back. So Rimmer gets back to Earth, maybe. Lister gets back to Earth. Rimmer maybe becomes Ace, flies off, saves the world, and Crichton. Whatever. I'm trying to think of the best 1-4 stories that Crichton would have had to finish off for him. What would you think Crichton's Magnus Opum would have been?
Probably he no longer believes in Silicon Heaven.
Yeah,
because we never reached that in the books. He still believes in Silicon Heaven. So
yeah. But that's what I'm saying. So where would they have finished, and so he could have continued? So here have had a happy ending ever after type thing. Probably with the rest of the mechanoids, with the MILFs. Maybe he met with the MILFs just as Rimmer's, just after the cats actually, I think me and Rimmer's about to fly away. Yeah. And it's the mechanoids that help Rimmer go back in time. Maybe they've found something in one of the things. And that's how it would have finished. So you would have had the cat meeting up with the cat people and actually doing the book with mostly that way. Yeah. Ace Rimmer bumping into it and then needing help. And Rimmer goes away, and then MILFs meet up. Crichton leaves with them, and they pass on the technology for allowing Rimmer to go back in time.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. So it would have probably, I think the 4-book deal would have been a good. It would have probably been continued on from this one to a backwards in Last Human, and maybe just had the 2 of their stories being a more conclusive ending.
Yeah,
that's just my thoughts on it. But I'm looking forward to next week. Next week we'll have to limit it to about no more than 2 hours, because I've got family coming down next week.
Okay.
Or coming up next week from England. They're coming up to visit, so with my mother-in-law and father-in-law are staying, so I've been told I'm not allowed to spend 4 hours online when they're here.
Okay.
So we'll still do it, and I'll basically, hopefully, and if we have to do a part 1, part 2, we will, but we'll see how it goes, because you can't actually stop halfway through a decent book and just say, right, we need to finish it off. So we're going to do that. We're going to give Backwards a good thing, because I did enjoy Backwards. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too.
I know some people have actually said Better Than Life was their favourite story. Backwards is my favourite of the 4.
Okay.
So it is. I loved Backwards. Even the reread, I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
So I know I don't have the Backwards book. I've got the audible book for it, but I don't have the actual book. So that's a wee bit of a bummer, because I was tempted to actually just sit and read that as well as do the audible, because that way I can concentrate a bit more.
I do.
Ah, yes, so yeah, look at that. Is it signed?
Not quite. Let's see, just a minute. I did. I got a ticket to see him, to see Rob Grant, to read a bit of it aloud at Waterstones in Liverpool, and I somehow managed to stick the ticket that he signed onto the back of the book.
See, I've only ever done that with Terry Pratchett. Yeah, I've got my book, and he basically drew a scythe on it and says, "I could murder a curry." Yeah. Because it's my favourite book, favourite quote from any of the Terry Pratchett books. So that's the only one I've got signed, one of my Terry Pratchett's. Yeah. But that was before I actually started doing the Comic-Con. So I've got comics and stuff like that signed, and pictures and bits and bobs. Like I've got my JC bag. I've got it signed by Robert Llewellyn, Norman Lovett, Chris Barry, Hattie as well. I've got the 4 of them signed on my JC bag that I made.
Yeah.
I'll dig that off the wall and just show it next week. But I still want to get some more Red Dwarf stuff. I want to meet Chris and Craig. That's the 2 I need to meet and get my autographs of. But God knows when they'll ever come up to Scotland. I'm lost. But thank you very much for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining these pair of smegheads talk Red Dwarf. We have still got a couple of books to go, so join us next Wednesday for Backwards.
Yeah, same bat time, same bat channel.
Yes, same Smegging channel. So, ladies and gentlemen, remember, I ain't old, I'm classic. PG may be out.
See you, smegheads.